TB testing vans and all sorts of things. They operated out of the old nurses' residence thanks to a coalition of Black radical and Puerto Rican medical workers who were influenced by Frantz Fanon and who saw revolutionary political education as an essential part of, I want to say, health communism, but also simply health care, i.e. the overcoming of drug addiction in this context. And so this young lords organizing with drug users is really important, I think, as it recognized for us today in an opioid epidemic, as it recognized an essential feature.
My bad. That was my fault.
I think what we're all interested in at this conference, which is sort of recognizing that miseries of life under capitalism fracture the proletariat and break people's bodies and dispose of our lives or render our lives disposable. Overcoming class society will require a practice of, complex healing and not maybe healing isn't even the right word for some of what we need in the sense that, health communism helps us understand that health is, one of capitalism's vectors. But I'm maybe getting a bit far from the question at this point. I'm the theoretical one, and Melissa has actual laws in mind. Although when disciplined, I do write op-eds on things like the UK Supreme Court decision defining women, for example, as a cissexual
No, it's
creature,
not. I just hit the wrong button. My fault.
Ago. So M.E. O'Brien has an article called Junkie Communism that talks about the takeover of the section of the Lincoln Hospital that I've just been talking about. And she writes that, the crisis of capitalism deepening, right? Insurgent movements will need to grapple with drug addiction and illegality in that sense in more skillful ways than hitherto. We need a practice of liberation that recognizes and embraces the fundamental dignity and potential revolutionary agency of drug users, and calls on she calls on a new approach to mental illness that I think is consonant with B and Artie's.
All right, I think we're back now. We're back.
M.E. writes, we need a communist politics that does not assume respectability or stability.
Again, guys,
that
I
does
apologize.
Not divide the world
that
between the innocently poor
you didn't miss anything,
and the chaotically
Sophie wasn't really
dangerous.
saying anything.
And she finishes by saying, we need a communist politics that welcomes
Everyone
us all
share
and
out the new
engages us
YouTube
fully
link,
as
please.
whatever we are. I think that really resonates with my points about the refusal we should be proudly enacting to define something like woman. Feminism has never needed to know what a woman is in order to proceed, and that's just how it is. And she says, as freaks and fuck-ups, as faggots and trannies, as wreckers and miserable wrecks, as addicts and crazies, we need a junkie communism.
I just want to underline, the sort of final point that you made, Melissa, and thank you both so much for that, because I think what we're really talking about here is political risk tolerance.
Everyone,
and I think there is much greater
please. Apologies again.
Tolerance for duking it out in the court system, for the kind of assurance of talking to a lawyer who's going to give you the most conservative answer. I think that a lot of the uphill battles that we face right now are a issue of political cowardice from a lot of people that are in this movement, that really care, that are doing good work, but that feel that the stakes have been raised to such a point that their actions are constrained by this landscape of risk that is mediated by these many court decisions that have layered onto, in particular, reproductive care or, HRT for minors. And I think so much of my dear collaborator, Jules Gill-Peterson's work and her idea that, has been such a through line of our coverage on Death Panel for years now, which is that we are in a moment, an ahistorical moment, where the state is asserting that it is cisgender. And it is looking back to a history of, binary gender that the United States actually doesn't have codified into law. And it is remaking the legal and administrative state to mirror this ahistorical assertion that the state is now cisgender. And I think that a lot of the work that Melissa does, now as a journalist is so important, because bringing these lenses and bringing this, more expansive risk tolerance into reporting on this is also part of the, stretching across the void that we face right now. And I'm going to move us on to our next question, which is, across time and place, people have broken laws to preserve life. Underground abortion networks, DIY HRT sharing, unsanctioned community clinics, all testify to the fact that illegality is not a measure of harm, but often a measure of political threat to dominant power. In an era of rising fascism and rollback of public goods, care will increasingly require risk, creativity, and solidarity. As our rights are working their way through the courts, the work of building health justice falls to us. But building outside of institutions requires risk. Not everyone can take the same risks, but someone must. And we need models, solidarity, and courage to move together. And we need to have each other's backs. No matter what risk someone is taking, whether it's a risk you agree with or not, you need to have each other's backs. So what models, past or present, can guide us in creating care infrastructures that exist outside legality? How do we collectively resource, protect, and expand these networks?
Thank you also. That was super, super kind. I have to go back to sex work, not actually, but conceptually. It's a fucked up time to consider breaking the law in so many ways. That's not one of them right now. The clinic that I came up in, that
everyone
sort of
mount the like button, please. Let's get the viewership back
plugged
up.
me into
Mount
this
the like
larger
button.
movement of sex worker rights groups.
No excuses.
Connected me even with folks who were doing incredible work, kind of like ours, but a little different. So the clinic I'm talking about is called St. James Infirmary, and unfortunately has closed in the last few years. But for more than 20 years, it was a sex worker run by and for clinic in San Francisco. And it had some relationships with the City Department of Public Health. By the time I got there, we were doing some billing with the state of California. It was in this space where some of the things that we did had to comply with certain sets of state regulations so we could have those resources. But there were plenty of things that we did that didn't require that, to do street outreach, to go into strip clubs, to go into massage parlors, to distribute condoms, to talk to people about what they're seeing at work. We didn't have to ask permission from the state to do that. Could the state repress us? Yes. Did we have people trailed by police and their act of doing harm reduction outreach criminalized? Yes. But that's a risk that we could manage as a group. If you're going to be a peer health educator, you're going to have a know your rights training. It has to just come with it, and it has to be part of it. And I miss that work. But luckily, there's so many other people who've continued that work and done models on that work in slightly different ways. In Chicago, there was the incredible organization Young Women's Empowerment Project, sadly also not with us, though the folks who put that on are out and doing incredible work still. But the risks they took that no one wanted to take in this space at the time was to talk about young folks who trade sex. And, it made them pariahs of the anti-trafficking movement, it made them even some folks in sex workers' rights spaces were uncomfortable with what they were doing. It was sort of held up as a look what will happen if decriminalization happens. But all they were doing is what we were doing with young people. And in providing them resources, being a peer health educator is a job. People were able to take the skills that they had from doing sex work and find ways to leverage that into this community work that was incredibly powerful. I think that that is the kind of, maybe I romanticize it, but I just feel like those are the people I would trust right now to take risks with me. And
well,
I think
that
that's
little
sort of
scare of the stream going down woke me up. I'll tell you that.
You can take risks.
But we managed.
And
we're back.
It's probably not going to be all lawyers. So there are some great lawyers. I'm very heartened by the existence of the Repro Legal Defense Fund that If When How is doing, that grew out of their work on the criminalization of pregnancy outcomes, so that anybody You know, if you're self-managing your own abortion, if you have concerns about going to the emergency room, like you can call them and you can get support. And they understand the movement context that they're working in, which is pretty rare. So I think it's about sort of finding the group of people that you're going to think about taking risks with. And also understanding that it's not just like black or white. There's not just like inside the law and outside the law. There's so much room to move that doesn't require asking permission from anyone. You just have to sort of build the structure that's going to work for you.
I'm going to keep what I say now extremely brief, I think, because, you know, I've already spoken about models or
Q&A,
examples
Q&A.
for one thing. And because I'm really, really looking forward to the conversation with everybody here.
Me too.
But, you know, it strikes me that, you know, a challenge in talking about what people are doing in the present right now that is outside the law is that it's outside the law and you don't want to talk about it for that reason. But indeed, look around you and you will find extraordinary networks that have sprung up, you know, in the last couple of years to resource populations so that they can get on with doing other stuff. And I mean resource in the domains of, you know, DIY, estrogen,
DIY hormones
and distribution, and
oh yeah,
all
Sophie?
kinds of other things. But you know, it's also maybe interesting for a second to just talk about. I know I've been sort of pointedly using this nerdy phrase, positive supersession, twice already, I think today, and I think I just want to sort of make a claim for abolition in that sense, in that very nerdy sense, because I think it is actually something there's an unconscious disagreement about on the left, like what does abolition mean? I really do think there is a critical utopian significant value to it sort of cleaving to this very particular sense of what it means to be an abolitionist, to view change, and this is a model for change in a sense, it is a theory of historic change, as something that proceeds by paying attention to the purchase that institutions and forms of the present have on us, right? This is maybe not how you've heard of abolition talked about, but it is actually how the philosophers of several decades and indeed actually centuries talk about it. Like when you abolish something, you're not just negating and destroying it, you're turning it inside out. You're paying attention to what it is that the thing that you're talking about speaks to in humanity. You know, it's very long ago and it seems completely insane to us now, but, you know, slavery was part of a kind of moment of humanism. It was supposed to be part of an enabling of a certain stratum of humanity to be brothers, right? It's mad because indeed that struggle has come quite far. It's not finished according to abolitionist practitioners, but it you know, the act of abolition is ongoing. Even that one, the slavery one. The original one, if you like, because the commodified human beings in question were sort of saying, oh, humanism?
It's like any other conference.
Like human fraternity? Sounds like a pretty good idea. Be a shame if, you know, some of us who are literally commodities were to destroy that in order to bring it closer to itself, in order to actually
literally commodities,
make it closer
Sophie.
To being real. And that's kind of what I personally am attached to in this idea of abolition. When you abolish the police, you do burn down police stations, I imagine. Indeed, we have, but or some people have allegedly. But you know, but you're also much the bigger part of abolition, as everybody is reminding us in that tradition, is the building of infrastructures of real safety, of real accountability, of real justice. You know, and it's the same with the family. You know, capitalist care has to be abolished in the sense that we all are pretty clear that care is a real need, right? What does the family offer us? What is the promise? It's like a promise that you will be deeply, profoundly, unconditionally, selflessly, uncalculatedly known and held, you know? Now, I mean, is the family really doing that? I mean, you know, I do think that the majority of culture and literature suggests that there is a pretty big shortfall between the ideal of family and the reality lived on the ground. But that doesn't mean that the needs and the desires and the hopes are stupid.
Oh, I don't have to
Right?
pay to stream this.
Abolitionism
I
is
just snipe it
actually,
off
I
your
think,
channel. So we're
the
good.
position
I'm good.
that takes those needs seriously, like seriously enough to be like, what if we actually tried to meet them? Right? And that's why, you know, a moment like this where the hope is so difficult a discipline strikes me as the worst possible time to retreat to sort of reasonable, realist, sort of lowest common denominator demands, right? One of the things that mutual aid networks really show is that you can have what you want. You can have it for free. I've seen it happen and transform people a tiny little bit 1,000 times recently. People think they can't have healthcare in this country, indeed, because you basically can't, right? but then when you actually get given some, it's transformative, right? And we can, as Diane di Prima says in that famous poem in the Revolutionary Letters, you can have what you want, right? Ask for everything. Anyway.
Thank you both so much for that. I just want to add 2 more models quickly that I think are really relevant and sort of offer very different examples. And one is SPK's model of patient-led research, which was a huge part of their demand. They not only wanted space to practice care together and to do therapeutic work in community, they also were seeking sanctioned research budgets and space from Heidelberg University. And the question of whether patients should be allowed to lead research on themselves was actually probably the most, in the words of the administration, like the most perverse request that SPK made, was to be able to lead the direction and ask the research questions. And I think in this moment where we're seeing money siphoned out of biomedical research faster than anyone can catch their breath, this is a really important time to be thinking about research models that also defy the kind of ways that we have been funding them for about 100 years in this country, which obviously come through the military industrial complex, and that's a whole other question. But I also want to point to the work of folks like Shira Hassan and Just Practice Collaborative, who do things like abolitionist social work practice circles and support groups, where you have, folks who are aligned politically and aligned through their professional alliances, and sometimes their politics and their professional requirements or the norms of their profession conflict so deeply that folks burn out of these jobs, and we lose advocates in the family policing system who are there trying to interrupt harm and interrupt criminalization in the process of family policing. And so those are some other models for ways that sort of are less like drawn upon examples. It's easy to think about some of the best known examples, but I think these are two examples that are going to be increasingly important moving forward in the landscape, especially that we're looking at right now in the United States. So with all that said, let's switch to the second portion. So just a reminder, the session is being live streamed. Keep that in mind in this discussion portion, please. I'm going to take Stack. If you'd like to speak, if you'd like to contribute to the floor, please raise your hand. I'm going to take a Stack, and then we'll do in groups of 4, I think, to start. Okay. Who would like to get on the Stack? No one?
Come on.
Okay. Sorry.
Talk.
Sorry, I'm partially blind. Okay, so we have Comrade in the green shirt. Comrade in the back with the black shirt and white mask. Comrade with the white shirt and white mask. Comrade in the blue shirt, white mask. Jean jacket.
Notice they're not talking about race
Anyone
because
else
they
to get in
don't
the stack?
acknowledge race. They're not saying the white comrade.
Okay, we
Or
can
the
take
black
more of a stack
comrade.
later. We're gonna do
They're
5
saying the
to start.
comrade in the green
So
shirt.
comrade in the green shirt, if you want to step up to the mic, I think it's facing the
College
wrong
everything
direction.
shirt?
I'm so sorry.
I don't know where it is.
I mean, maybe not. I'm really just here to let everyone know if you want to learn more
I don't know where the shirt
about
is.
underground
Oh, it's right here.
methods of maybe terminating a pregnancy, tomorrow we have DIY abortion happening at 1 p.m. You can learn how to use abortion pills, how to find them. They're still legal in all 50 states. You can order them in the mail, and they're 98% effective and safer than Tylenol. So,
Bro.
anyway.
Thank you,
Hey,
comrade.
learn how to have an illegal abortion.
Okay. Oh, you're on your way up already.
Hello. So last year, my little queer family and I moved from Utah here, seeking more legal protections.
We're
There were
gonna
lots
clip
of laws
that.
that were being passed in Utah. Didn't feel safe. Didn't feel wise to continue to stay with the way the political turn was looking in November, and then ended up happening in November. And I think that I had this overinflated sense of importance of the legal protections that we would face as a queer family here in Illinois versus in Utah. And I'm learning that is an important part of the struggle, and also a more minuscule part of the struggle than I anticipated. And what I see is, while there are legal protections, it's in a sense of community and in a sense of like community safety, and there's still so much struggle there. And while the law does seem to be more on the side of like our genderqueer kiddo being able to use whichever bathroom they feel like, it still feels very much like an uphill battle to try and get like the law and cultural expectations and community expectations in line. So I'm wondering if there's advice or resources or thoughts on how to merge these legal protections that we're really privileged to be able to have in Illinois, and then be able to like bring the community into that mindset, thought process. I know that we are going to have a lot of different viewpoints than most of our community and most of our neighbors, and that was long-winded, but yeah.
Thank you so much, comrade. And there was a suggestion from Sophie, I think, that it was actually really great to have the mic facing the other way around. But obviously, if you don't want your face on camera, you can still face us. But feel free to pick your direction when you come up, is what I'm saying. So comrade in the white shirt with the white mask in the back right.
Hey, good afternoon.
Man.
I guess one of the I'm sitting here and I'm thinking
maybe
about, well, what's
they,
different
them.
today than what was happening this time last year? And I think, last year, the year before, there were a lot of very similar concerns around criminalization. That seems like it's been a very like long-standing vector that's existed for a long time. And there are definitely like ways to think about risk in terms of criminalization. I think the thing that kind of feels new to me, which I could be entirely wrong about, right, is this sort of like other dimension, which is
maybe a
these like
ma'am.
targeted cuts to funding, the austerity, the kind of retaliation on that level, and the really tough positions it puts any kind of above board institution in, right? Which raises a whole set of questions about like, how do you navigate interfacing with any kind of institutionality? And kind of the other way, the two things I think about this alongside is sort of the Texas abortion ban, right? And how part of the really scary component of that is the really heavy civil liability, right? And how because of the way civil law works differently than criminal law, right? That's a kind of, in some ways, a more dangerous thing than criminal liability. And kind of as sort of in this last moment, I kind of remember like Andrea Dworkin and Catherine McKinnon, right? And the desire to sort of like regulate pornography through civil liability as opposed to criminal liability. So do you think that like in this moment, because of this kind of focus on changing funding and institutionality and how these things interface, we're dealing with something that is different than sort of the moment of criminalization? And how does our response to it shift in light of a shift of direction or tactics?
Thank you, comrade. Such a good question. We have the comrade in the blue shirt, and then since we have 5, maybe we'll do all 5 and then we'll pause. Okay, and then jean jacket, comrade, you'll be next.
Thank you all so much. This was really lovely. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated, Sophie, what you were saying about not needing to know what a woman is to create feminist agency. And I think I really appreciated the historic examples that were given. I recently learned about a Boston group called the Gender Identity Service from the 70s. For example, they published an article called Lesbian Feminist Orientation Amongst Male to Female Transsexuals. This was at a period where if you were trying to get gender reassignment surgery, you had to basically say you were attracted to men so that you could present as a heterosexual woman upon finishing that. And so to offer an alternative where that was not the norm and where feminists, cis and trans, could lead these efforts was really inspiring and just very different in that moment. It's so interesting too to think about reform in all of this, Massachusetts being the first to pass gay marriage. And I've talked with the historian that told me about this and the fact that these things lead to reform so often. And so I'm just trying to think through with some of the historic examples that you gave. It feels very hard to imagine these radical things leading to reform in this moment. It feels like we need revolution, and reform is not going to happen anytime soon. But just curious if you could maybe talk about any of the historic examples and what long-term changes they may or may not have created. Thank you.
Thank you so much, comrade. And comrade in the jean jacket, if you want to come up next.
So it feels like everything is different now, but for a while, particularly in liberal states, but not only, it felt like the state was eager to embrace and promote transness and gender deviance as long as it could fit its agenda. So like trans women's jail in Denver, gender responsive prison being branded everywhere. And I'm really curious for that context where that's still happening, instead of Trump basically saying transness isn't real or shouldn't be real, but in the states where that is still happening, how do we fight that particular mess in the head of many folks who could be convinced that if you can build a unit for trans women, you could also just let them all go?
Thank you, comrade. Okay, so we're going to pause here for a second for panelists to respond, and hopefully we should have enough time to take another stack. But
okay, I'll say a couple of things. I think this is painful and controversial, I think, but I do think I would almost posit the existence of enemy trans feminisms, right? If there is such a thing, I would go one step further. This is so if we, and I've heard many people say this at this conference, are agreed that there is such a thing as, a commitment to white supremacy from people who are not themselves white, right? I think it's high
Multiracial whiteness.
we become a little bit more confident identifying forms of trans politics that are, I know, paradoxical, sort of committed to cisnormativity, right?
Okay.
There are sort of
Thank you.
trans politics.
Sophie is saying that you can't be a feminist if you're not an anti-capitalist.
One example of this would be the sort of, the trans medicalists, but then another example that comes to mind is the sort of the way that Zionist IOF or IDF, Hasbara has proceeded lately
Asmara!
with trans,
Sophie!
feminine, and trans masculine soldiers kind of paraded as examples of a sort of fully completed settler eugenic athletic perfected embodiment, which really kind of fits
Sophie's this
within
close
the
to taking
logics
the
of
to knowing the
cisness.
JQ.
A sort of, you know,
She's
it's
so
almost
close.
as though you are assigned trans female in this imaginary or something like this, right? The naturalization of assigned trans femaleness, you know, is the best I can come up with in this moment. Now, why is this important?
We
Because, as you
never
there's
say
a
that
demobilization
here. That
and the
is
confusion
not
that can
welcome
arise
here.
when
Just
people
so you
think
know.
that there are sort of, you know,
Not
these concrete
allowed.
examples of,
I know
of the
exactly
state
what that
taking good
reference
care,
is.
you know, of
No.
trans life, which I do think it just constitutively cannot, will not, and does not. Which is not to say that it is meaningless to carve out spaces of legality and decriminalization at all, or that every legal fight is a bad priority. I don't think that at all. But okay, and then Ariel's question about the sort of the shift and the role of civil law historically as the weapon that certain kinds of what I would call femo-pessimist or indeed pornophobic, in the sense that Carol Lee, the great sex worker liberationist, identified it. Very useful word. I think I say pornophobe, and certain people think I'm calling an aversion to pornography materials somehow like a phobic thing. Porne, by the way, is a word that Carol Lee insisted we use because of its expansiveness. It means that, you know, it means the life of whores. It's a word that refers to monetized sexuality. Right? In Marxist feminism, it used to be very important not to accept capitalism's separation between the spheres of monetized or directly market-mediated and non-directly market-mediated sexuality. So like the wife and the prostitute, you know, this has kind of fallen out quite a bit. But the pornophobes of the 70s and 80s, you know, were you were using civil law, right, to attempt to eradicate porne, I suppose, right? Both the sort of representations of monetized sexuality and their existence in the world. You know, I mean, it's very clear in Dworkin's and McKinnon's writing that, you know, they accept this this non-distinction in a sense between reality and representation, that for them, you know, pornography is a depiction of prostitution, and that's kind of the problem with it. And, you know, I think in times of nationalist crisis, these pornophobias reappear. We might hear about this from Paisley Kara talking about moral panics, I'm not sure. But in any case, you know, nationalist panics, natalist fertility panics, and these kinds of resurgent, you know, also enemy feminist responses that mirror them, this go together. It goes together to have a panic from the liberal center about the numbers of children or the numbers of marriages that, or the numbers of, you know, people of the right color that are or are not being manufactured for the future. And, you know, including on the left, a sort of feminist articulation of total, you know, separatist is one word for it, but I actually kind of want to invite you to think of it as nationalist, a sort of sexit, like a sort of feminist Brexit, in the term of Turf Island, you know, the pleasures of which are this kind of, it doesn't surprise me that the instrument of law, it comes to mind, because the, you know, the terrain of womanhood there by definition has to be quite neatly bounded, and yeah, I'm curious what Melissa has in mind. Maybe we can have a back and forth. But, you know, yeah, in order to have, I know that McKinnon was lauded by everybody under the sun for not being a TERF in that one piece. However, I do think it is quite, talk about kind of structural turfiness or something, right? Her opposition to, okay, McKinnon thinks a trans woman is a woman. Does she think a sex working trans woman is a woman? This is the serious point, right? Because not in an agentive sense. I do, by the way, still maintain that one of the best critiques of McKinnonism, or McDworkinism, if you like, ever written is buried in the Cyborg Manifesto, this very strange socialist feminist document of the early Donna Haraway, who insists that this perspective is one that achieves, I'm paraphrasing, what patriarchy never achieved, which is the complete obliteration of female agency, right?
Okay, thank you for that. Also, can I promote your new piece about why we should not be jumping aboard the reclamation of Dworkin train? It's fucking cathartic. And I've been like leaving McKinnon last in my book because I really just like don't want to deal with her. But like what you were saying is reminding me of some of the ways I've been trying to like reconceptualize her. Like I think like, should porn be legal or not? Should we, regulate it through a civil framework or a criminal framework? Like misses the fundamental thing, which is this woman believes the law can do something about pornography. Really? Have you seen The Law? No, and yeah, Carol Lee, I don't know if she was part of this group, but one of the early like precursors to the sex worker rights group Coyote, which stands for Call Off Your Old Tired Ethics. There was a precursor group called Who, which was whores, housewives, and others, is the early 70s, and others were lesbians. So I don't know, like I've always found more possibility in hanging out with people who are embracing being disreputable to a degree. Rejecting that, playing with that, like I find that a much funner place to be than like begging for scraps from the law. And like I forget where you are right now, but the question about sort of like the experience of being in Utah and great legal repression versus the experience of being in Illinois, where there's more protections theoretically. I'm not up to date on all of the Illinois protections. I mean, there's a parallel around abortion as well, but like, what does it mean like day to day, like how your life is different under that is something that is just we are not paying enough attention to that. And maybe it's because there's like such pressure on to make real for people what it is to live under the repression. But like a lot of the reporting that I've done over the last 5 years, sort of like tracing all of this, is like, in a queer community outside of Detroit that had book banning bullshit happening, including people going into the library and physically assaulting librarians they thought were queer or trans, and they were, with pride book displays, right? This is in like a liberal community. Or watching the failure in California, watching, in liberal abortion shield state protect. I don't know if it's actually an abortion shield state, but state that certainly loves to think it's good on abortion, California, when a clinic sought to open, I think in Beverly Hills, the like NIMBYism pushback to that was just outrageous. So I find those sort of, what is it really like to get stuff done beyond people's fantasies of who they are? Really important. And it gets lost, I think, a lot in the like kind of red state, blue state, ban state, no ban state. Like it's much more complicated day to day. I feel like I want more. Do we have time to do another round? What do you think?
We do. And there was one thing from, I know who we promised in the planning that I would, try and embody Jules and bring her into this conversation as best I could. And I actually have a quote from Jules that I was thinking could be good to bring in to, specifically to speak to actually kind of everyone's comments. Back in 2022, when we first started collaborating, Jules and I had this conversation about austerity and, what critical trans and disability politics can learn from each other and build towards together. And she said the following: disabled people, sexual minorities, and trans people are cast as bourgeois and decadent, in part because their subjectivity has been reduced to cultural value. These perspectives have been dematerialized, as if people's experiences of identity aren't also directly the product of class stratification in a particular moment in capitalist society. Yet inclusion and exclusion are degrees of separation from formal economies and from either state care on the one hand and or state violence on the other. Sometimes the difference between the two isn't even quite clear. That's why pointing out that reactionary politics are hypocritical, logically inconsistent, or based in irrational belief is the most lukewarm critique. What's helpful to me is to first reject moral panic on arrival and say, I have no need to reply to easily falsifiable moralizing. That's not the terrain in which I make political demands. It's not the terrain in which I value my life. I think that can be a very tricky lesson to learn for an austere left afraid of losing even more. And unfortunately, we are collectively learning it in a negative sense. We have learned it through unprecedented mass death and suffering. She's referencing the pandemic. But here we are, right? And on the other side of that horror is irrefutable evidence and empirical urgency to think differently. She then says, power is very anxious all of the time. So is the ruling class. They aren't happy. They know very well how weak their positions are. They know how much stronger we are all together. I'm glad we don't have to invent concepts bigger or newer than solidarity and collectivity. Those still work. That's been true for a really long time, and that makes it even more true today, not less true than it used to be. It's not just comforting, it's actually galvanizing. We have what we need here to start with the good enough, as Argentinian travesti activist Marlene Wayar might put it, and then to let our desire guide us to what is even better. And perhaps that isn't entirely rational. Perhaps it requires a certain level of trust in one another, trust in our desires, trust in what is unruly and ungovernable about us. So as always, shout out to Jules Gill-Peterson, who wishes she could be here today, but she's recovering from surgery, so send her your love. I think we have room for some more folks to join real quick. Anyone else want to hop on the stack? Okay, so we have, I'm gonna say jumpsuit in the black mask. Comrade in the very back, yes. And plaid shirt. Pink shirt. And anyone else? And comrade in the back center. Yes, you. Brown shirt, thank you. Oh dear. Okay, jumpsuit, come on up.
Uh-oh.
Hello, thank you so much for giving this talk. It's been great so far. So obviously throughout history, straight women and lesbians have had a somewhat tempestuous relationship with each other. In recent years, when straight women have had more of their bodily autonomy criminalized and policed, similar in the way that lesbians have had in the past, not being, available to commodify for straight men. I think, me personally, I expected more solidarity between these two kind of like oppressed classes, and I have found instead more of a wedge that has been driven between them in recent years. Probably, things like, the idea of trad wives and things like that. The idea that there is social capital to be had in making yourself as available to, white cishet men as possible. What I wanted to ask is, are there any practical solutions or ways that maybe, lesbian comrades and straight women comrades can come together and find more ways to discuss the fact that, we are both communities that are being heavily policed and criminalized in similar ways, and how we can, kind of join together in order to improve both parties' social standing, as opposed to looking at our proximity to this, if we think of gender legally as a hierarchy, about our proximity to access to the cishet white man, and how can we, form more of a coalition in order to make all of our lives better.
Thank you, comrade. Comrade in the back left. And then comrade in the plaid, if you want to get ready to come up. Sorry, comrade, do you mind keeping your mask on, if that's okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Mask up, comrade.
Hello, comrades in the room and on TV and on the panel. My first name is Elias, and I am from the state of Virginia. Will I tell you more about me? Not right now. I was going to say I have one piece of relatively good news or a happy comment to the people on the panel, because I know some of y'all were talking about being in like nonprofit and more institutionalized spaces where there's a feeling of people not being ready to take on the risk of moving into illegal or like gray zones. I was just going to say that is probably has to do with the spaces that you're moving in, because when I'm at the trans affinity group at my local LGBTQ center, I'm like the readiness to enter, or the feeling of having already been thrust into the criminalized or like being along the pathway to that is high, and thus the willingness to continue operating in that manner is also high. Yes, that is what I will say. Yeah, so which is like, yeah, both good and bad, but yes, as people become more desperate, then they will organize and get the care they need in whatever way possible. I was going to ask let's see. I was going to ask about the role of like internationalism in bodily autonomy struggles and like LGBTQ struggles. And if you, because I know that y'all pointed to several historical moments that were inspiring to you, but are there comrades in other countries with perhaps other legal regimes and also other like social protections in general for their student or for their citizens? Because in the United States, that's very lacking. Like, it's one thing to say like, oh, you have protections against housing discrimination as a queer person, but it's like, if you don't have housing, then, who gives a shit? Like, yeah. So I was going to ask if you had any international examples or pathways that you would want to link us to.
Thank you so much, comrade. And plaid shirt. And then we're going to do pink shirt. So get ready. I'm trying to like run us through so everybody gets a chance to speak. Sorry, I don't mean to rush you all.
Hi, thank you so much. What a blast to be here. So I've been thinking a lot about risk reduction and this idea about risk and trying to encourage or make it exciting for people to take more risk, or at least make it doable. And I think a lot of what I've been thinking about is how we are so afraid of taking on the risk of breaking the law or facing down the law
again.
And I think sometimes that our whole apparatus, our whole state apparatus actually invisibilifies other risks that we are taking on when we don't break the law or don't face down the law. And this is something in my kind of day job, I think a lot about how it is that we can find and identify not just the risks that are in front of us or easy for us to identify and instinctively kind of be afraid of, but also the other risks that are going underneath the surface. And I think that this is a really scary time when the stakes are very high, which means that the risks of acting and not acting are both higher. And I think, it was so fun to hear you say individual, because just in the last session, somebody else brought that up and I hadn't even really heard that before. And I would love to just hear more about this idea that not just identifies risks that are invisibilified, that we don't see. For example, like the longer we don't act, the more our planet dies. There's so much out there. But also how it is that we can understand that our risk and our harm can be mediated by the different ways we consider how we engage in risk, including how we kind of even conceptualize individuals or ourselves. And I think, Melissa, your discussion about just that question you pose, how is it that I find the people that I will take risk with? I think that's also a question about how am I reducing my risk? And I wonder if you could just speak to that, because I think it's about solidarity and the actual feeling of solidarity, which I think is foreign to us.
Mm-hmm. Such a great question. I'm so sorry to keep us rushing through, but I want to just make sure we can get through everybody and maybe just as quick as possible, give you guys a chance. We might have to take some replies off camera at this point, but comrade in the brown shirt, if you want to get ready. Oh, you're going to, okay, fantastic. Thank you.
I'm really going to be quick. So as you guys were talking about the law, I was just staring at Bee's laptop, and she's got the sticker, the laws aren't real sticker, which is actually a poster that I have too. And all I can keep thinking is that that's the thing. It's like people hold up the law as if it's this thing we need to follow. And that's that's the gist of what you've been saying, but that's the thing. It's like laws aren't real. It's just something that has been made up, and if you just let go of that need to believe that the law is something to be followed, then it's easier to kind of just do what needs. If you just feel like it's more important to do you need to do, what people need, than to follow the law. And that's basically all I just wanted to say. So
Thank you, comrade. Okay, we've got like 2 minutes.
Okay.
How
2
do you
minutes.
guys want to split that?
I'll say one thing.
Okay.
One thing. Okay, so I really love this idea of like, how do you attract the people perhaps who will want to take risks with you? Like, how do you sort of put that out there in the world? And I can think of it's hard to do, right? Because you're sort of like putting a sign on yourself. Hello, please be gay, do crimes with me.
Be gay, do crime.
and
Hello.
It's also really
Hello,
fucking
Mary
weird
Nardi
just on the
gang.
laws not real
Hello.
thing, as an abolitionist, to see like incredibly like blue no matter who people being like, the law is not real, and it's like, come closer. So I don't know, for me, laws aren't real like is like one of those beacons of like, do you want to come into this conversation? Where are you at? You know, maybe you're not gonna be where I'm at, but like we can start to
real.
like build a context to talk about why perhaps risks are worth taking.
Huh.
I have no idea if I'll manage to formulate this, but listening to several different thoughts, and I think one of the people who came up has written an interesting, really important essay on the libidinal left and the role of a sort of eros of anti-fascism that's necessary for us. I mean, thinking about literal sexuality, which is different from the libidinal and eros. However, there's something that Lauren Berlant said quite scathingly one time about the rise of constituencies that are stunningly ignorant even regarding their own desire. I just remember how like scathing that phrase was, and thinking about the dialectic of pleasure and danger that the sex radicals in the 1970s and 80s were putting forth. So the analysis that I offer in Enemy Feminisms is that you get to quite a bad place in feminism when you get rid of one pole of this very vital dialectic, right? People, of course, need to fight for safety because we are in danger. It's true. There's like an epidemic of rape and sexual abuse in this world.
What the hell, StreamYard?
The comrades that
Okay,
I
we're back.
choose as my ancestors, they're all about fighting for, you know, ecstasy, even on the battlefield. Like, in a sense, this is a good summation of what perhaps our project politically is altogether, like seeking ecstasy on the battlefield.
Thank you all so much, and thank you to our sign language interpreter. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you, panelists, for such a wonderful conversation, and thank you all so much for being here today. Deeply appreciate all of you.
All right.
Take care and stay alive another week, y'all.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you. Okay, our schedule is as follows. We have about 90 minutes before the live keynote. There is a break right now. I want to watch the other presentation that just streamed about organizing in space. But before that, I want to make a couple of clips. Can I make a couple of clips? Will you guys humor me and allow me to make some clips again? So the first clip we're going to do is that a DIY abortion lady that got up and was like, we're having a session about DIY abortion at the conference. And that's going to be clip number 1. I'm getting it set up right now. And hopefully my clipping tool works. Oh, come on. Clipping tool. Come on. It works at its own whim. You never quite know if it's going to work or not. It should work. There's no reason it shouldn't work. There it goes. Okay, now we're in business. All right. Comrade.
Okay, we
Or
can
the
take
black
more of this stuff
comrade.
later. We're gonna do
You're saying the
5 to start.
comrade in the green
So
shirt.
comrade in the green shirt, if you want to step up to the mic, I think it's facing the
Follows
wrong
everything
direction.
shirt.
I'm so sorry.
I don't know where it is.
I mean, maybe not. I'm really just here to let everyone know if you want to learn more
I don't know where the shirt
about
is.
underground
Oh, it's right here.
methods of maybe terminating a pregnancy. Tomorrow we have DIY abortion happening at 1 p.m. You can learn how to use abortion pills, how to find them. They're still legal in all 50 states. You can order them in the mail, and they're 98% effective and safer than Tylenol. So,
Bro.
Thank you,
Hey,
comrade.
learn how to have an illegal abortion.
Okay. Oh, you're our new.
Okay, got it. Hang on. Stop the recording. Bear with me, guys. Thank you for coming. And I apologize for the stream going down earlier. That was totally my fault. StreamYard was screwing with my Facebook feed, and so I was trying to remove the Facebook feed, and then I accidentally closed the YouTube feed. So it was totally my fault. My bad. I'm glad we're up on this new stream, though. Welcome, people. Maybe if you couldn't make it earlier, maybe you were doing something way more fun than this. Let me just clip this real quick. Give me 1 second. Hang on 1 second. Hang on. 1 second. 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 Almost there. Okay. Got it. Okay. Exporting the DIY abortion thing now. And then while that is going, I want to go find that kid that was talking about basically doing criminal things. And I want to get that too. So we're gonna do 2 clips real quick, and then we're gonna go and we're gonna watch that outer space presentation. Give me 1 second. Where's that kid talking about abortion, the illegal things? Where's that kid? There he is. Pretty sure. Yep. That's him. Hang on. 1 second with the export, guys. This is a good time to take a bathroom break because we have met our super chat goal. I promised I wouldn't ask you guys for money anymore, but I do appreciate you guys hanging out. You can still feel free to send money if you feel like it, but I really appreciate everyone who sent in super chats to support the streams all week long that we've been doing. Please make sure you have mounted the like button for me. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already. Actually, let me just tweet out this clip. And I'm going to give you guys the link on the Twitter to share the DIY abortion clip. Just got to get my Twitter up. Teamwork makes the dream work. Okay, this is exported. Let me just get this up on the Twitters. FYI, they're teaching people how to do underground DIY abortions at the Socialism 2025 conference. All right, got the tweet up. Let me put the link to the tweet in the chat. I want everyone to retweet this. I want everyone to bookmark this. I want everyone to quote tweet it. If you quote tweet this tweet, I will retweet you. There you go. There is the abortion clip. Now let's get this trans kid talking about doing illegal stuff with his trans friends. One more to go, and then we're gonna go watch the organizing in space presentation.
And then comrade in the plaid, if you want to get ready to come up. Sorry, comrade, do you mind keeping your mask on, if that's okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Mask up, comrade.
Hello, comrades in the room and on TV and on the panel. My first name is Elias, and I am from the state of Virginia. Will I tell you more about me? Not right now. I was going to say I have one piece of relatively good news or a happy comment to the people on the panel, because I know some of y'all were talking about being in like nonprofit and more institutionalized spaces where there's a feeling of people not being ready to take on the risk of moving into illegal or like gray zones. I was just going to say that
Oh,
that is
yeah?
probably has to do with the spaces that you're moving in, because when I'm at the trans affinity group at my local LGBTQ center, I'm like the readiness to enter, or the feeling of having already been thrust into the.
What are you guys complaining? Okay. The audio sounds fine. Okay. I am doing this okay. What are you guys talking about? Are you talking about the clip I just posted?
Learn how to use abortion pills, how to find them.
Okay. Are you talking about what we're watching now, or are you talking about the clip we just posted? Everyone needs to we need to stop the recording now on this clip because we need to start it over. The audio doesn't sound okay. It sounds fine to me. I don't know what you guys are talking about, honestly. It is what it is, guys. It literally is what it is. So now we have to go back. Start again. What do you guys want? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, it sounds fine to me. You guys can complain about the audio if you want to. And when you are spending 12 hours in a single day streaming the Socialism Conference, then you can fix the audio if you feel like it. But it sounds fine to me. And so I can't do anything about it.
Criminalized and
It literally sounds fine on my end.
Are both to
I don't know what's going
legally
on.
as a hierarchy.
So you're just going to have to deal with it for a second.
Cishet white man, and how
And more institutionalized
Hang on.
spaces where there's a feeling of people
Hang on.
not
Back
being.
up. Back
lives
up.
better.
Thank you, comrade.
It sounds fine to me. So I don't know what you're talking about. I really don't.
And comrade in the plaid, if you want to get ready to come up. Sorry, comrade, do you mind keeping your mask on, if that's okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Hang on.
Comrade
Okay.
in the plaid, if
And
you
now
want to
it's not-
get ready
Now it's not
to
even
come up.
loading. This is great.
Sorry, comrade, do you mind keeping your mask
What the
on,
fuck?
if that's okay?
Yes.
Thank
What
you
the
so
fuck?
much.
What the fuck? Mask up, comrade. Now it's not even loading. Okay. Hang on. We got to do it again. We have to wait until this decides to load. There we go.
And comrade in the plaid, if you want to get ready to come up. Sorry, comrade, do you mind keeping your mask on, if that's okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Mask up, comrade.
Hello, comrades in the room.
Why is it
and
doing
on
this?
TV and on the panel. My first name is Elias.
Why is it doing this? There is no reason the video should look like this. God fucking damn it. God fucking damn it. God fucking damn it. There's literally no reason the video should look like this. Okay. All right. I guess we're not doing that clip then. I will figure out that clip later. I'm not fucking around with this anymore right now. I don't want to hear any more people complaining about the fucking sound that I can't control anyway. So we are going to go back and we're going to watch the other presentation and we'll just do the other clip later and that's going to be fine. All right. Let's see. Okay, so we are going into a presentation that literally just happened. It was happening simultaneous with the other one, and this presentation is called Reclaiming the Future: Outer Space as a Site of Organizing and Imagination. All right. I'm going to be very, 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 very clear. I don't like it when people bitch and complain in the chat about technical difficulties that I can't control when I'm in the middle of a live stream. So is everyone done bitching and complaining about how they didn't like the sound? I mean, I could have just taken it away. Do you guys want me to just make the clip while showing nothing on the screen? Is that preferable? Can we move on now? Is everyone ready to move on? Everyone ready? Everyone good? I can't fix the sound in a clip while I'm on a live stream, guys. Bitching and complaining about the sound is not actually going to change anything. It's just going to piss me off. All right. let's go into this presentation. And we get to fast forward through the beginning. All right, this presentation is called Reclaiming the Future. Outer Space is a Site of Organizing and Imagination.
Sound check.
Yeah. Hello to our AV friend in the back. Can we do a little sound check? Can we get an okay from you?
Yeah, we don't
Everything's
do a
good.
sound
People in the
check.
back can hear us too.
Okay. Nice
Even
and
with the
clear.
door.
Maybe once this person.
Waiting for them to get started.
Questions and making comments as well.
This is just the standard intro stuff.
Discussion and questions. We invite you, because this is like an unfamiliar topic, I think, for a lot of people in the world broadly. We're going to invite you to ask like clarification questions if they come up while you are listening, in addition to the fact that we have this like ample time for Q&A, discussion, your thoughts, etc. Any questions before I keep going? Okay. All right. So nice to meet you. We're going to do a couple intros first. My name is Lucianne Walkowicz. I go usually by Lulu, and I'm an astronomer, movement artist, and educator based here in Chicago. I am one of the co-stewards of a space called Liberation Landing, which is a small campus of buildings, which we like to think of as an abolitionist liberatory ecosystem of folks who are organizing in the city. Some of you may know it through it being the location of the Breathing Room, which is home to the Let Us Breathe Collective. It is also home to Sukasa, which has a long history of resistance to state violence. If you're local and or if you're planning on coming through Chicago and you're interested in collaborating or having space, we do a number of political education programs, mutual aid programs, etc. We're always looking for more people to help us hold the campus up and lift together. And I see a lot of comrades who have been involved in the room, which is awesome, but we're always open to more. So please feel free to come up and talk with me at any point during the conference. I'll be here all weekend. My background in sort of academic background and research background is in astronomy. A lot of the work that I've done has been around questions of where we find life in the universe. But I also work and am interested in questions about the social impacts of outer space and the way that we think about exploring and learning about the universe beyond us. So I will leave it there and give Chanda a moment to introduce herself.
So first of all, thank you for hosting, Lulu, and for doing a lot of the labor in getting this session put together, and for being the host. So I'm Chanda Prescott-Weinstein. I am a theoretical physicist with a background in astrophysics and cosmology. I mostly focus my research on searches for dark matter. I am also a writer, and
phone call, guys. I'll be right
I'm
back.
interested in, generally speaking, in science communication, communicating about the cosmos and astrophysics with the general public, and communicating from the perspective of someone who was raised in the movement. So I'm, I guess, what people will call a movement baby. And so everything that I do in physics and in cosmology comes from the perspective of thinking about what is my relationship to the communities that raised me, what is my accountability to the communities that I come from. So I also want to say that while this is happening, I grew up in East LA, and so people, I'm sure there's been plenty of discussion at the various sessions people have been at about the kidnappings and the disappearances that are happening. So for me, this is a very personal issue. It's not a hypothetical issue. This is happening to people on the streets where I grew up. So I just want to acknowledge that even as we get the opportunity to sit and think about the world that we want to build, from my point of view, these questions that we're going to talk about in this session about our relationship to space and how we think about the night sky and the cosmos as part of our leftist imagination are really rooted to the material question of what it means to build a world where these kinds of kidnappings do not happen, and a world where borders are a thing of the past. So I guess I think the last thing I'm supposed to say is that I have written a book, The Disordered Cosmos, a journey into, thank you, a journey into dark matter, space-time, and dreams deferred. And you can find that in the bookstore. And I'm also the author of 2 upcoming books, The Edge of Space-Time, which is coming out next spring, which is really an argument for why we should have a relationship to the cosmos that has nothing to do with capitalism. Because the universe is too fucking fabulous for capitalism, y'all. And then after that will be the cosmos.
I just heard that. I had to take a phone call with someone I know, maybe know at the conference. But the universe is too fabulous for capitalism. I love it. Hey, Axehead, thank you. I appreciate the super chat. Can we just do that again? Can we experience that moment again?
Coming books, The Edge of Space-Time, which is coming out next spring, which is really an argument for why we should have a relationship to the cosmos that has nothing to do with capitalism. Because the universe is too fucking fabulous for capitalism, y'all.
Yep.
And then after that will be the cosmos is a Black aesthetic. And I'm happy to chat with people about that academic book afterwards. But first, we're going to hear some remarks from Lulu, and then I will talk to you all a little bit. And then I hope people will start thinking about their questions and write them down. It's okay if talking about this, you feel nervous, you feel like you don't have the right words. There's no such thing as a stupid question, just easy questions, hard questions, and questions we might bullshit you about the answers to. Probably won't, though. We'll probably tell the truth. Okay, on that note.
And including questions that we might not know the answers to, right? I think one of the things that I love about like an abolitionist framework, right, is that it is a very fundamentally creative framework. It is something where, all of us, like whether that word describes you or whether you're just broadly on the left, we're talking about creating a universe that includes all of us in ways that this universe does not currently, but not because of any universal laws. Those are the laws of human beings. So anyway, so the premise of this session is that the left should take space, as in outer space, very seriously as a site of political possibility. And something that I hope to maybe convince you of or open your mind to in the course of my own remarks is not only that space is a site of possibility, but that it is also a place that is quite full of political realities that have direct consequences for the well-being and liberation of people here on this planet Earth right now. So not just in the future, which, as the title of this session suggests, I really hope that we can act to reclaim, but really like in the here and now. And this is something that has been happening throughout our history. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about where space actually is. Because something that I learn a lot about from talking with other people is that I run into the idea that space is something that is very far away, that it's like very out there. And I think that's quite natural, right? Because, for sure, like space not only has like our planet Earth, and there's places on our planet that seem very far away, but space also contains like trillions of stars and other galaxies and black holes and other planets. And by definition, it is home.
And dark matter.
And dark matter, like a lot of dark matter, y'all. And everything that exists, right? Including this planet. And it is called outer space because it is out there. But actually, space is really not far away at all. It is much closer than you think it is. So I'd like you to join me on a thought experiment. I would like you to imagine that you have a magical car. This is a magical car. It can also be a magical bike for those of you who are not car-centric, a magical train, if you will. And that whatever it is, you can drive it straight up off of the earth, just straight up from where you're sitting. If you did that at below the highway speed limit, you would be in space in less than an hour. So think about that for a second. Not even speeding. You don't have to speed at all. You don't have to blast off. If you could just drive up at a little under the highway speed limit, you would be there in less than an hour's drive. Now, the question of like when you reach space is a little bit artificial. So the Earth's atmosphere is not a dome. If you think that the Earth's atmosphere is a dome, we have other problems, and you should see me after class. We can talk about it. But there's no defined boundary, right? There's no like sign that says now leaving Earth and now entering space or anything like that. And this is something that people have argued about over the course of history, because as you go into space and higher in the altitude in the atmosphere, and as you're leaving the surface of the Earth, it's kind of just like if you go to high altitude on mountains, the atmosphere just becomes thinner as you go. And so one of the things that people have argued over and that human beings have found to be very convenient is to define a particular altitude that they say is the boundary of space. So that's often called the von Karman line, and it's about 62 miles above sea level, which is roughly 100 kilometers for those of you on the metric system. So for reference, when you hear about space tourism, like a lot of these like Blue Origin flights that are taking celebrities to space recently that we've all heard about, I think, those go to an altitude that's just over like 105 kilometers. So 5 kilometers or 2-ish miles into space. Put that in more local terms, since I'm a local person, I will say that when I got my first COVID vaccine, there was much less demand in Wisconsin for the vaccine than there was in the city of Chicago. So I drove over the border to a Sam's Club to get my first dose of the COVID vaccine, and I entered Wisconsin at roughly the same distance that Katy Perry went to space. Maybe that helps it land a little bit more for you, maybe not. So space is not like physically that far away. But what's more important about that than its physical distance is that the distance of its impact for you, not only as human beings, but for you as organizers, is that there really is no distance at all. Most of you probably used a mapping function of some sort to find your way here, right? To find your way either through the city of Chicago or maybe to the airport or just to the McCormick Center. And that ability to precisely map your location and use it for navigation relies, as you probably know, on GPS, which is provided by satellites that are owned by the US government and operated by the Air Force. At the moment, all that GPS capability comes from 31 satellites, at least for the US constellation. Other countries and conglomerations of countries own their own GPS satellites as well. Now, these days, the regions of space around Earth, which astronomers usually refer to as orbits, are crowded by a lot more than those 30 satellites. And those satellites are engaged in a wide variety of activities, from the relatively innocuous or even sometimes helpful in the case of Earth-based observations and things that tell us about, for example, climate change. But also on the end of that the other end of that spectrum is that some of them are engaged in things that are quite nefarious. And these satellites also orbit at a lot of different distances, with the most crowded region these days being something called low Earth orbit, also known as LEO to his friends. And LEO is anywhere that is technically in space, so over that 62 miles off of the Earth or 100-kilometer line, out to about 1,200 miles or so. Now, a lot of the satellites that are currently up there in LEO are from Elon Musk's company SpaceX's project called Starlink, which I will talk more extensively about in a little bit, which has been, since 2019, launching huge quantities of satellites into this orbit, which is, in the case of those satellites, they're about 340 miles off of the surface of the Earth. So again, not that far at all. Okay. So that's a little bit about where space is, but I also want to talk a little bit about what space is, because I've just told you that it's like everything that exists. Chanda threw dark matter into the mix, and all of that, I think, if you don't spend all day thinking about it, like the two people up here, can sound a little esoteric, right? And it makes space sound very huge and incomprehensible, and it is huge, but it definitely can be comprehended. I promise you. So to put it simply, and to paraphrase Sun Ra, who I think Chanda will probably touch on, or who certainly you could ask about Sun Ra a lot, space is a place, or rather space is all of the places of which the Earth is one. And the places in space that we explore with telescopes, or like Mars, that are places we hear people talking about actually going to, all of these are physical locations. And it's very easy to look at images of space with all of their beauty and grandeur, and how, generally speaking, they might make us feel very small. And so it's very easy to forget that given, maybe a technical challenge or two or three or a lot, those are all places that humans could have been or could be. And there's no real specific reason that we're in this place and not another place. Or if there is, we have at the moment only an idea of factors that have contributed to us being here on this planet, but we don't know exactly why. So aside from being a physical place, space is also a metaphorical location. It's a place that has geography in our minds, right? And the cultural function of space has really varied from culture to culture, and also like through time. Cultures aren't fixed, obviously, they evolve. And something that I think we deal with presently that has been like a recurring theme, particularly in the modern day, is that space really functions as this kind of projection screen that we use for playing out ideas about the future. So because of this wonderful conference setting, I'll give you one of my favorite pieces of leftist history is that imagination about space is actually how we got blood transfusions. So today, blood transfusions are a medical therapy that saves and has saved many lives around the world. But at the turn of the last century, the century before this one rather, there was a Bolshevik party member named Alexander Bogdanov who wrote a book called Red Star. And Red Star is about an Earthling that goes to Mars, and this Earthling meets the Martians and discovers that they are capable of having a more perfectly communal society by exchanging blood with each other. After the revolution, Bogdanov proposed a medical center to study his idea of putting blood exchanges into practice, something that he'd already been messing around with at home. And so he was granted this medical institution. And this was like really before, like if you think back, it was really kind of before people fully understood like bloodborne pathogens or like blood types. And he did eventually contract like a disease and die of his own experiments, but they laid the foundations for blood transfusions as a science. They are why they exist. So we have this life-saving treatment just because of somebody's imagination about space. So that transition from science fiction to science reality is one that we really see over and over again, because people have long realized that images of space are very, very powerful vectors of propaganda. And one of the people who deserves a tremendous amount of credit for the United States government having popular support for putting human beings into space, a program which I think we can all recognize, regardless of whether you feel like this was a giant leap for humankind, et cetera. I think we can also readily hold as well that this was a piece of Cold War geopolitical maneuvering, right, that needed to have support in the public. So one of the people that made that happen was actually not a scientist or an engineer. He was a painter. And his name was Chesley Bonestell. He's often referred to as the father of space art. And he collaborated with the scientists and engineers who are working on technologies to put human beings in space on a series of paintings that were published in Collier's magazine. These paintings were the first places where people who were not engaged in any of that science or engineering encountered these very vibrant images of people living and working on the moon and the surfaces of other worlds. And the series had very, very wide distribution. So really, this was hugely influential in helping the average person picture what it would be like for humans to stand on land of a world that was not the Earth. Now, today, we have a lot more than paintings. Over the past several decades, right, missions to, for example, the surface of Mars have produced what are essentially the clearest examples of landscape photography of another world. And those images are really powerful, and their viewpoint invites us to think about people standing there, to imagine ourselves standing there. And to distinguish those from some other more problematic visions that I will talk about in a moment, I want us to be clear that those of you in the room who are US taxpayers paid for those landscape images of Mars, right? Those landscapes are not just aesthetically beautiful. They are bonus content from these missions that are there to study the planet. Now, Mars is a sovereign world. It has its own history, a history that is as long and complex as our own planets. And today, it is an absolutely hellish environment that I would gladly send Elon Musk on a one-way trip to if his body would not have catastrophic consequences for its environment and damage the
Hey,
ecosystem.
thank you.
But the
Wasn't a lot
temptation
of
is
pictures
there.
booked? That's good to know.
All jokes aside, due to some factors that you can ask me about like later if you're curious, Mars really has a lot to tell us about the history and origins of life in the universe, as well as how planets move through being a place that is a hospitable environment through climate change to become a place that is inhospitable to life. And it was the United States' public people-funded space program that did that. And I think that there's a lot that can be different about NASA, and certainly I think I will say that I can hold my critiques of big federal agencies and the US government in the same hands as I hold the resistance to shunting every possible human activity into the sphere of privatized capital machinery, right? So let's dive deeper for a moment into these political dimensions of space and what their real world, like earthbound direct impacts are for all of us. So as I mentioned, space is this very powerful delivery tool for propaganda. It has broadly embraced associations with visions of the future and with science and technological progress. And the language that we most commonly hear when used to talk about space is very, very heavily colonial. And that's can be literally the words like space colonization. It can also be things like framing space as a
Are
frontier.
you suggesting
It
we're
can
stealing
be
indigenous
discussing
land?
space as a place where humankind has some sort of manifest destiny to go.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to brush aside the work of many people, the scholarship that has been done by, for example, Chanda, also by indigenous scholars, a bit by myself to problematize this language. But I will say that it remains the dominant palette that people reach for when they try to paint a picture of space and by extension, a picture of the future. And I think that while there is a broader awareness of like the issues in using that language and how those themes infiltrate the way that we think about space in the future, unfortunately, the primary effect of that awareness has been that people now reach for wanting to do better by picking euphemisms, right? And for example, like one of the euphemisms that gets used all the time is the word settlement, which many of you I'm sure will recognize as having its own associations with the colonization of Palestine by Israel. So I think it's important that we often recognize that this colonial language used to describe people's plans for space is actually accurate. It is the description of what they would like to and are planning to do. And people listening to this talk, I'm sure you're painfully aware of Elon Musk. Welcome to my world. But maybe you haven't heard of, for example, Bob Zubrin. Bob Zubrin is an aerospace engineer who in the mid-90s wrote a book called The Case for Mars. This detailed his ideas for colonizing Mars. I think that is the appropriate verb in use there. And many people who are curious about space or even space scientists themselves read this book and were inspired by it. Now, Zubrin went on to found the Mars Society, which advocates for colonization of Mars and investigations of Mars, but also human presence there. They even operate a research center that does quite a lot of like astrobiology or life in the universe research called the Mars Desert Research Station. And it was by talking about Mars colonization that Zubrin gained prominence. Now, today, people who are familiar with the Mars Society or Zubrin's writing on Mars have usually not looked at the other books that he's written or his other activities. For example, his book about how people concerned about human impacts on climate and environmental degradation are somehow anti-humanist. And today, he is a fellow at the Center for Security Policy, which is a far-right think tank that has been designated a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we have all of these examples of people entering into discourse and into positions of relative influence by using space as supposedly this neutral topic or something where they can just talk about their ideas for the future without even realizing that they often have ideology behind it that goes unrecognized. Now, There are also a lot more straightforward examples of spacewashing, where talking about space really opens up the room for, or even directly abets, the perpetuation of state violence. So, for example, many of the companies that build infrastructure for space are defense contractors. And so they do their activities in space, sometimes for defense purposes and sometimes on the side of their main business, which is building weapons to murder people and curtail our freedom of movement. For many years, Northrop Grumman has used NASA's current flagship mission, JWST, as a proud part of its marketing campaign for painting itself as an innovator. And they've gone so far as to bring like a full-size interactive model of JWST, which, by the way, this telescope is about the size of a tennis court. It is huge. They brought it to the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, which welcomed it and continues to welcome defense contractors pretty regularly with open arms. Now, presumably
Because they're
Northrop's other
capital.
products, like the weapons it manufactures to carry out genocide against Palestinians, the surveillance technologies it provides to US border control to surveil and criminalize people, just don't make for a fun exhibit. But space certainly does. So colonization and the infrastructure of criminalization extend not just from here on Earth, but out into orbit. And they've been able to move forward hidden behind this glamour of space and these flimsy arguments that you hear about the social good that they supposedly provide. So I'm going to return to talking about Starlink, because about 6 years ago, Starlink, which is the SpaceX satellite constellation, was being marketed as an internet provider for supposedly underserved parts of the globe, despite there being analysis that showed that Starlink was not actually priced in a way where it was affordable for anyone who actually needed its services.
Starlink was too capital.
And Starlink is what's known as a mega constellation of satellites. So since 2019, SpaceX has pumped over 7,800 satellites into orbit. So think back to the 30 that provide GPS. Now there are 7,800 just of Starlink satellites. Their goal is to have as many as 42,000 in orbit eventually. Now, these satellites pose a really grave threat to both present and future projects in space by crowding low Earth orbit. They can create debris that could one day bar our access to these orbits entirely. And the thing is, it doesn't actually matter whether any individual user can afford Starlink or not, because individual internet access isn't its main user base. The military is. And because of wide adoptions of the more secure military-grade version of Starlink, which is called Starshield, the US military now treats Elon Musk as a de facto statesman who has the capacity to determine which conflicts have access to the internet at which time. And SpaceX is the top launch provider in the world. They were awarded just in April $6 billion for 28 launches. So they're working also with the National Reconnaissance Office on something called a ground moving target indicator, which in other words uses space-based resources to track people moving on the ground. And I'm sure we can all see the problems with that. So at the beginning of this talk, I made a big point of emphasizing that space itself is not that far away from us at all. But I hope you're also getting the picture that space activities, the industries, the workplaces, the environmental impacts all happen right here on Earth. And the number of humans who have ever physically been to space or done work in space is minuscule by comparison with the number of people who work on space on Earth and who are impacted by it, including yourselves. So whether it's places like the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, where the organizers of SpaceX have been resisting SpaceX's colonization of the region and unregulated degradation of their land, or the access road to Mauna Kea on the Big Island of Hawaii, where Kanaka Maoli mountain protectors have been resisting the construction of the 30-meter telescope, or in Brazil, where the Quilombola communities have brought a case against the Brazilian state over human rights violations related to the Alcântara Launch Center. These are organizers and activists just like you. They are out there and they need our solidarity. And none of those people that I mentioned are doing it because they oppose or hate space. Just like you or I, they embrace space as a site of wonder, a relative, a precious part of all of our respective cultures in one way or another. Space is the part of the planetary environment that in principle, everyone can see and connect to. Like that's not even true of the ocean. And in a moment, I'm going to give Chanda the floor to talk about space as a site of radical imagination, and what it would look like. I hope we can all talk about to do, what we audaciously titled this session as "Reclaim the Future" in this context. But what I want to leave you with is the thought that our opposition is making plans for space. There are conferences on space capitalism, the extraction of resources, how to make space an arena of war, which it historically has not been. And we cannot give them an inch or they will take the universe.
Yeah, that is actually probably true. That is actually probably true.
I'm just going to say those space capitalism conferences are wild.
Just like the socialism conferences.
So this is just me editorializing, but I just feel like I need to add on to that point. One of the things people do at events like that is they sit around talking about what space governance should look like. And so it's really important to recognize that our opposition are talking about how to govern us from space and how to make space part of the governance structure that they have already established over us or running over us. And so
true.
In making a choice to engage or not engage with space, we are making a choice about whether we engage with one of the fronts of contestation and struggle that we're going to be stuck with, whether we like it or not. So I think that's maybe the bridge between Lulu's comments and where I'm going to go. So I want to start by telling you all a story. So one day, the young men of Isi Mbide village came together and hatched a plan to climb up to the moon. Once there, their plan was to remove it from the sky and rent it to whoever could afford it. And so through this celestial endeavor, they were trying to do a few things. So one, they wanted to show how strong and how capable they were. Like, we got the moon, we're boss. And then this was also a money-making scheme. They actually wanted to rent the moon out to people for their weddings as kind of like a cool, like you got the moon for your wedding. That's pretty amazing. So the plan was that during the full moon, and this is what they did, they climbed up the tallest Iroko tree in the area. And once they reached the top of the tree, an additional man would climb up shoulder to shoulder so they could go higher and higher towards the moon. And the idea was that eventually someone would get close enough to hook the moon, and then they were going to pull it down like an ornament pulling down from the sky. And to communicate progress, they used a long rope attached to a gong, and whenever a new climber was needed, they would bang on it, and this would lead to someone going back up and adding to their spatial extent. And so as the story goes, the mission failed because the moon angrily realized its space was being encroached upon. So basically the moon was like, there are some colonizers coming. And so the moon declared, "Tua, tua, tua. Who instructed you to invade this territory? Did your mother or father ever dare do this? May the earth open up and swallow you all whole."
Oh my word.
And immediately after, the earth opened up and the men and the tree fell to earth, leaving nothing behind but a crater that apparently to this day still exists. So this is a story that appears in Obioma Uchendu's The Early Spacemen of Nigeria. And it is a story that is told in the region where
of course the Nigerians tried to do something stupid
it is
like
an
that.
old story.
Of course,
so I think
Nigerians.
It's easy to interpret a story like this as one that is simply mythology, like local or regional storytelling. But I think it's important to notice there's a material element to it, which is one, recognizing the moon as a material object that can be physically engaged with. This is a form of scientific theorizing that I think often gets categorized as mythology when it comes from certain communities and science when it comes from a different set of communities. There's also this element of the Earth and the moon having some kind of dynamical relationship where they're in communication, and that turns out to actually have a physical basis, that there is actually a strong gravitational relationship between the Earth and the moon, and it goes in both directions. So the moon is in Earth's orbit, but the reason that we have the tides that we do is because of the way that the moon pulls back on the Earth. So that's one of the stories I want to tell you. The second story that I want to tell you comes from the journals of a slave ship captain. And so I'm gonna tell you my version of the story because frankly, like fuck that guy. And also the way he writes it is fairly unremarkable. That was shadier than I meant it to be, but here we are. So he tells the story of witnessing some captives coming off of the ship in Suriname, having just survived the Middle Passage. And they are given a broken bottle and basically told to clean themselves up for the auction block. And these men apparently took the broken bottle and they shaved their heads, and they didn't just shave off all of their hair or just like clean up their faces or something like that. They carved images of the stars and the moon into their hair and then emerged from the ship with the cosmos on their heads. And this has been noticed by scholars throughout the years as a moment of first creation of a distinct African America's Black Atlantic culture, that this is one of the first moments of cultural creation for people who have just survived the Middle Passage. But
Black
I think
culture
part of what
comes from
stands out to
slavery?
me is the piece about the sky as
space
a
or something?
recognizable part of the ecosystem. So as Lulu said, the sky is the one part of our ecosystem that is globally accessible no matter where you are on the planet. So if you think about a situation where you have experienced an alien kidnapping, which is what the Middle Passage was, it was a kidnapping by these alien freaks, frankly. And coming out, how would you know that you are in the same cosmology as the one that you left? You look up at the sky and you recognize the star that's there, that's our sun. At night, you look up, you see the moon, and you recognize that the moon is going through the same phases. This is the same moon. This is part of how you know, okay, I don't recognize these plants. I don't necessarily recognize the color of this dirt. The water color looks different to me. And I have been in this ship. I went across, as some people might have experienced it, this big river. But I know that I am in the same cosmology because I recognize the night sky. And so I think when we talk about what the cosmos is to us, I think it's very easy to get caught up in Whitey is on the moon type narratives, because that is how the story has been presented to us as part of this Cold War framework that Lulu was talking about. And part of what I want to encourage people to think about is that the night sky was there, and we were there with the night sky before the Cold War was there, before the Middle Passage, in fact. And we have always, as a species, had these relationships to the night sky. So one point I want people to walk away with is the cosmos is Black history. I think this is a really important thing. The cosmos is part of our history. If you want to go back to where we began, honestly, you got to go back to the Big Bang. That's where the hydrogen comes from.
It's white
That's
history.
where the stars come from. The stars fuse carbon, oxygen, all of these things that we're made of, that our world is made of. And part of the way that I think about this is it comes from thinking through Jamaican American philosopher Sylvia Wynter, who I think a lot of people, in terms of people who kind of challenge the normative humanist framework with, I think, some Marxist perspective, people often go to C.L.R. James or Claudia Jones. And I think Sylvia Wynter is right there and is deeply underappreciated as a philosopher who was thinking about some of these same issues about what is the human, what does that mean in relation to labor. And in conversation with Catherine McKittrick, she made this comment: the paleontologist Juan Luis Arzuaga proposes that the human is not only a languaging being, but also a storytelling species. In my own terms, the human is Homo narrans. So the point that she is making here is that we are not just a biologically constructed species, but we are also a species that self-constructs through the stories that we tell. And so thinking about this from the position of the kind of work that I do, I immediately was like, wait, we evolved under the night sky. And some of our earliest stories, the first stories that we told, are about our relationship with the night sky and the daytime sky, the things that happen in the cosmos. So we are a storytelling species, and the night sky figures in some of those earliest stories. It's not really possible, in my view, to think about our humanity without thinking about the night sky. And that means to be cut off from our night sky is to be cut off from our humanity. And that's actually part of the violence. There are many elements to the violence of the Middle Passage that we could be here for the entire conference and not have enough time to enumerate all of them. But I will say one of them is putting people in a place where they could not access natural light and they could not access the night sky. That's part of the violence. So starting from the point that we are Homo narrans, then we can start thinking of ourselves as a small part of the cosmos that are crafting stories about the rest of the cosmos. And that in fact, it is actually part of what we do, and it is part of our birthright. I know rights are kind of a fraught framework, but let's go with it for a second. It is part of our birthright to have this relationship with the cosmos. The things we can see and the things we can't see. I just gotta say, the one thing I gotta say about dark matter is that most of the matter in the universe is dark matter. So mostly the stuff out there is stuff we can't see, right? And so when I'm talking about the cosmos, I include all of those things, the things that we can and cannot see. So when we start to think about, I spent time thinking about this also through the lens of Robin D.G. Kelly's work on freedom dreams. What would it take for people to have access to their freedom dreams in relation to the night sky? And I think that this can be a really interesting way to motivate the kinds of dynamical change that we need to have in how our social systems are set up and who they are set up for. So I guess I have on my list here, every child having access to the dark sky means, I guess I added fuck Starlink was my first bullet point.
How about every child can go outside?
When we talk about the satellites that Lulu was just discussing, we're really talking about a blighting of the night sky. And I always think about that part in the Animatrix where humanity blights the sky so that the machines can't access their energy source. And for me, this is like we're doing that to ourselves by literally blighting the sky. And it does mean light is getting reflected back to Earth. It does mean the instruments that we invest in as a community, like the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, this was a very expensive experiment. We've invested a lot in it. Now has to take into account the presence of these satellites so that we can get clean images of the sky. And I'm saying I'm not representing the observatory in any capacity, but it is something that I'm a member of one of the scientific collaborations that's trying to do science with it. So that's a serious thing that is happening to us right now. For those of us who are amateur astronomers, I do amateur astronomy. I can't get a long, like 5 to 10 minute image without something going through it right now. And that's because there's just so much activity in the sky at night. But also when we think about what it means to have access to the night sky, to really be able to go and sit and wonder, to really just sit and think with yourself, to think with your community, what does this thing mean to me? What does it mean to be part of this expanse? Means that you have to have enough to eat so that you are not sitting there thinking about where your next meal is coming from. So that you're not having to organize for people in your community to figure out where their next meal is coming from.
So you can think about space.
It means housing security. It means clean water.
We need socialism so you can lay on the ground and think about
access
space.
to the land that you have a relationship with. It also means clear skies, and that's not just a Starlink thing.
We
That's
need
also
environmental
about
justice
what
so you can
kinds
think
of
about
toxins
space.
are going into the air. Whether we're thinking about air pollution, et cetera. It also means ensuring that there is adequate public transportation that's accessible.
Yeah, we need
It
15-minute
means
cities so
everyone
you can
has,
think about space.
the kind of public transportation that whatever mobility device that they may need to
Yeah,
use
you
sometimes
can't,
or all
you
the
can't
time.
be free to view space
goes
unless
on
everyone
that
is free
public
from
transportation.
capitalism.
That's not optional, that's required. And it also means
Why do you need public transportation
our
to see the
incarcerated
sky?
folk, when they do get time outside, it's only during the day. And I have to ask, when even in the narrative where people are being sent to prison so they can get better, what kind of better are people being
Hey,
asked to become
guess
if we
what?
don't let them spend time with the things that are beautiful
You can
about
still
our
see the
universe
sky in
and our
prison.
world, if we're actively cutting people off from that? And I think that's one of the reasons abolitionism is really important. So a lot of these questions swirl around the question of what would it mean to live in good relations with each other? And I think that actually the access to the sky can be an
Yeah, the
interesting
galactic
thought
oppression
point
must
of
end.
how we do that and who we do that with and who we do it for. And I'd like to quote my mom, Margaret Prescott, here, who said to me recently, I was talking with her about
Stop
like
the
all
insanity.
of the things that are happening. And she said, without joy, what the fuck is the point? I cuss a lot. It's my mom's fault. My mom's actually probably watching this, so hi, Mom. It's your fault. But I really think this is also a piece of it, which is that this is something that brings us joy. And at the end of the day, I actually think that that's a key part of our organizing. I think sometimes in organizing spaces, we can get into the mindset of, who can maximally suffer. And I actually don't think that's the point. I really don't think that's the point. And I actually think that maybe it's been easier for me to hold on to perspective about that because of the kind of work that I do, even as we could spend this whole weekend talking about the bullshit that is being a professor and the bureaucracy and how painful it is. So I'm not trying to say it's all fun and games, but I do think that that's something that I'm able to continue striving for. So I just want to add to this also that science is shaped by the stories we tell about who matters and whose ideas count. So the way that we think about what space is and what space can be in our communities is shaped by whose stories about space we decide are the meaningful ones. Like if we say the only meaningful ones are the Cold War stories, then sure, all space is some whitey on the moon bullshit. But if we remember that space is other people's stories too, then we can start to reframe that. And I was really forced to think about this by the late Nikki Giovanni, who it turns out was like super obsessed with space travel and with Mars in particular. And she would go around like in interviews, this also appears in her poetry, but she had this kind of refrain of saying things like, can you imagine sex in space? She went on Being with Krista Tippett and said that, had a whole conversation about it. She wrote in her poetry, the trip to Mars can only be understood through Black Americans. So I'm going to say that I would have offered her the edit. Yes, I'm
Mars
saying I would
can only
edit
be
Nikki
understood
Giovanni.
if you're Black.
That really she meant the Black Atlantic because it's not just Black Americans.
Not just Black
who
American
experience,
slaves.
the Middle Passage, but in fact, the majority of people who were kidnapped were taken to South
Mars
America.
history is Black
so that's
history.
really a full continental experience. But she was really talking about if you want to ask someone about a hard journey,
God.
the descendants of the Middle Passage, the people who survived the Middle Passage, those stories can tell you about surviving a hard journey. And coming out on the other side and still being interested in the cosmos, still having questions about the cosmos. And as Nikki Giovanni says, in various places, all my people have ever done is go forward. And so I think part of what we want to invite people to do is think about what does it mean to go forward. And so I think from my point of view, and I don't think that this is just self-serving, although it does happen to work out for me, that the creative work of particle physics and cosmology is part of how we grapple with who we are. That's part of what people are doing. It's why so many people love Nova and popular science books and take photos of the moon with their mobile phones. This is part of how we think about who we are. And so I will just say, like, on a practical level, this encourages me to think about the following questions, which is, I'm wondering, is it possible to establish a basis for building space investigating technologies in a way that doesn't depend on the military industrial complex? And so I'm just going to plant that as a question that people can come back to me with for like details of why I think we ended up in the situation that we're in and why it's actually not a straightforward problem to solve, but I do think it's a solvable problem. And I think we also need to start thinking about big picture. How do we as a planetary species make decisions about our material relationship to the moon, to Mars? And so that means if we are going these places, who gets to decide what happens on those journeys? Who gets to decide whether we decide anybody is staying and for how long and what's the protocol for that? Right now, a very small number of people are making those decisions, and it's actually not particularly well regulated. And again, as I said, people are already starting to think about how to take advantage of this and do this. And if those of us on the left don't start thinking about it, we are literally just letting the right own it. And I mean own it, like in a very literal, like not metaphorical.
Like
I
private
mean own
property.
And so just to give an example,
We're
so
gonna
Lulu
own it like
mentioned global
capitalism,
positioning
guys.
system and GPS. I just want to point out that this is a technology that only works because of general relativity. And this is really important because general relativity was an idea that was like, it seems very esoteric. Space-time is curved. Matter causes space-time to curve. Like, what does that have to do with me? The thing it has to do with you is that almost certainly you used it sometime in the last 3 days to get you somewhere. So the question is GPS a bad technology because the Air Force developed it? I don't know if that's a good question. I do think the interesting question for me there is who gets to decide how we translate this kind of knowledge into human use and how it impacts other species that we share the planet with and our ecosystems. And the last thing that I want to say about this is that the big picture question is there's a whole group of people that are getting trained in a technical sense how to think about general relativity. It's not
Are they
actually an
saying time
intuitive
isn't
thing.
real?
Quantum mechanics is not necessarily
Maybe.
intuitive, although there are good
Talking
arguments
about
for why, for
quantum.
example, non-binary people find
Uh-oh.
wave-particle duality very straightforward. Yes, you can be both at the same time. Amr
What?
Al-Qadi gets credit for first kind of highlighting that, but I think there
Wait,
are various
space is
people who
non-binary?
not every non-binary person feels that way, but some people do.
Oh.
People are developing
Well, if you feel
intuitions for
that
this
way.
work, and if the only people who do it are the ones who are like, yeah, I'll go
Space
work
is
for the military, that's a
non-binary,
problem.
guys.
Other people need to have this intuition. First of all, it's fucking awesome. I can tell you, like, there are parts of my head that like I could do without, but that part of my head I like. And it should
Time is
be
non-binary.
that those
Yep.
of us who are freedom dreamers have access to that way of seeing the world too. And if we just say science is evil, I don't fuck with that, then we are leaving a whole way of being in the universe on the cutting room floor. And I think that's a mistake. So I'll stop there.
Q&A.
Thank you so much,
Q&A.
So
what the fuck? What just happened? No! It took it down? They took it down? They took it down in the middle of the fucking presentation? Can I download it? Those assholes! Well, I know Stu Studio has it. Stu Studio watched the whole thing. So I know he's got the whole thing recorded. That sucks. They took it down in the middle of the fucking presentation? For real? It's black now. What happened? Haymarket Books. What happened to the presentation? They set it to private. That wasn't live. No, that one was streaming while we were watching the gender presentation. They set it to private. No, I think the Socialism Conference took it down. Stu Studios got it. I know he's got it. He was posting clips of it earlier. Holy shit. I'm going to ask Stu to upload that. I want access to... Are they taking down all the videos? No, Sophie's presentation's still up. It's just the space one. I got to message Stu Studio. Hang on. Hey, Stu, FYI, they just took down the space presentation. Hang on. Do you have a full copy of the full presentation? A recording of the whole presentation. That's crazy. What the fuck did they ask? Hang on. Let me look at Stu Studios clips because he's been posting clips of this presentation and I want to know what they asked. Something about non-binary quantum something. Something about the presenters. He's got it. Stu Studio has that whole presentation. He has it all clipped up. Wow. That's crazy. I wonder what happened. I wonder what happened to make them make the space presentation private. It's not about copyright. They don't care about what makes you think they care about copyright. This isn't about copyright. This is about there's something in that presentation that they don't want people to see. Or there's something in that presentation that's causing problems. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of funny things in that presentation. I hope Stu Studio has the whole file and he can upload it. Why did they make it private though? I'm just going to keep that link open. We're just going to do that. Well, I guess then we are about 20 minutes away from the start of the final keynote of the night. So we unexpectedly have a little bit of extra time on our hands. That's all right. We are almost done, guys. We are but a few hours away from being done streaming. 12 hours of socialism. 12 straight hours of socialism. These are the things I do for you guys. Anyway, the final presentation of the night is going to be their closing keynote for tonight. It's coming up in about 20 minutes. Let's just do a run of the schedule just so you guys know what we have, because we still have all day tomorrow too. I hope you guys had fun for the 4th of July. You're coming here tomorrow to watch socialism all day, especially those of you who did something fun like going to a parade or a barbecue. Your penance for doing something fun is you're going to sit your ass down tomorrow and watch socialism all day. All right. Starting at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, we are going to be watching the live stream of Fighting Fascism, Lessons from the Colonies. And let's see what this says. Something French name, cut through the mythologies to show that fascism in Europe is no anomaly. It was a boomerang effect of the brutal European colonization abroad coming home. The fight against fascism cannot be successful without understanding the powerful struggle against colonization in the 20th century today. That's going to be the final keynote of the night. Now, tomorrow, if you want to see this full streaming schedule for tomorrow, here it is from the Substack. Tomorrow, we are going to start streaming at 11 a.m. We're going to be doing revolutionary accompaniment, holding each other when things fall apart. That's going to be about community care. And I think that has Emmy O'Brien's co-author in it. At 1 p.m., we're going to be doing The Border is Everything. The Border is Crisis. That's going to be about immigration. Socialism is a lot of fun, Billy. Okay. At 2:30, we're going to be doing Community as Rebellion, building networks of resistance inside and outside the university, which I think is going to be really good. It's going to be more about university organizing. At 4 p.m. tomorrow, we're doing What's at Stake, organizing the climate Armageddon. Now, listen, environmental justice activists are some of the most fuck-off, crazy socialists in the world. And so that is definitely one we're going to want to watch. At 5:30 tomorrow, we're going to do 2 presentations at 5:30 because there's a really big long break for the conference. Their End is Our Beginning, Cops, Capitalism, and Abolition. And then we're going to do another previous recorded one, Fannin at 100. Fannin is the guy that wrote about decolonization being violent. And then the final presentation of the Socialism Conference that they're going to do is called Sexual Democracy, Moral Panics, and Trans Politics. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will conclude our socialism coverage for tomorrow. Hey DW, even when they realized how weird that talk, weird that talk was, yeah, that was a crazy talk. I want to see the rest of that. I really hope Stu Studio will upload his copy of it so I can watch the rest of it. I want to watch it again. Like, that's how crazy that talk was. I want to watch it again to really make sure I got all the crazy out of it. So that is what we're going to be doing tomorrow, guys. As a reminder, the very best way to support the work I'm doing is always over on Substack, signing up for a membership at $8 a month, $80 a year. I am 100% funded by people just like you. Thank you again to everyone that has been so generous with the super chats this week. I really do appreciate it. This has been a lot of streaming for us. Of course, we're watching a lot of socialism. We're all suffering together. All of this does support the work I do. I am 100% funded, grassroots funded. I don't take big political money from anyone. You will never have to guess whether or not I'm telling you the truth because I always show you the receipts. I always show you the primary source evidence. Yeah, they're not doing the DIY abortion class online. I can't imagine why they don't want to stream the DIY abortion class. I just can't imagine why they don't want to stream that. So that is going to be tomorrow at the conference, but we're not going to be able to watch that, sadly. Let's see. What else can we talk about? Oh, if you're new to my work, I'm going to be hosting a little webinar in a couple weeks where I'm going to do an introduction to how to speak socialist language. This is going to be like a private webinar that people have to sign up for. It's totally free. You can make a donation if you want to, and I appreciate everyone that does, but it is free to sign up for. Please share this with your friends, share this with your family. This is going to be an introduction using primary source evidence from the left about how to speak the language of socialist. It's going to be very, very, very one-on-one level. So if you've been watching socialism with me for a long time, this is not something you need to go to because you probably will already know all the information in it. But this is just for new people because there's so many new people coming on the channel lately, new people discovering my work, and they've been asking for an introduction. And so I'm going to do one. You can sign up for that in the link I just put in the chat. You can also find the link on the Substack. You will find it right in the corner right there, Re-Education and Anti-Communist Introduction to the Far Left. You can also find it at decodetheleft.com. And it's right on the homepage of decodetheleft.com. Giant ass picture of me on the homepage. You can sign up for it there, and that'll be pretty rad. Let's see. I still can't believe they took that video down. It's so crazy. Anyway, we are waiting for the live stream of the final presentation of the day to start. I did see a couple questions come in, so let me just look at the questions that I flagged in the chat. Is your playlist about how to speak socialist a decent spot to understand? Well, okay, so yes. So this webinar that I'm doing, this is going to be super, super, super 101 level. This is going to be in a couple weeks because I want to be able to have a recording of it. However, if you would like to even jump in a little bit more than that, go over to the Substack, click How to Speak Socialist, and check out the 4-hour on-demand masterclass. This is a really good place to start if you really want a good deep dive. This has dozens of clips of leftist training in it. It's totally free. It's just embedded videos. They're also available on the YouTube channel if you want to find them there. It's split into 2 parts, part 1 and 2. And this will give you, honestly, the very best introduction. The reason I'm doing this other webinar, which is going to be a little bit more one-on-one, is a lot of people say, I don't want to do 4 hours. And I understand not wanting to do 4 hours, but the reality is it's like you need time to, there's a lot. If this is your first time watching socialism, it's like you're probably overwhelmed by the language. Well, there's a reason you're overwhelmed by the language, and it's the same reason I can't teach everything about the language in an hour and a half, okay? There's a lot to wrap your head around with the language. And so the How to Speak Socialist class, not that one, this one. The How to Speak Socialist class really gets much more in-depth into the language, and it is going to show more aspects of it. So this is more of like a mid-level to advanced course, whereas the webinar is going to be totally, totally basic, honestly. Yeah, and you know, I don't understand like the propensity of people to say, I'm not going to bother to spend 4 hours learning about the left. It's like, bro, I'm streaming socialism for 12 straight hours today. What are you doing? You know? So that's going to be coming up. And we're just kind of waiting right now. Okay, let me see if there are other questions. And if you guys have questions about the left that you want me to answer, please let me know in the chat. Here's a classic one. Do they have jobs? Yes, they have jobs. Yes, they have jobs. Confirmed. They have jobs. Indeed, they have jobs. Conservatives. They have jobs. Conservatives are literally the only people on the planet who don't understand that normal people work for a living, regardless of whether they like work or not. Shelly says, this is a lot to take in, but I appreciate you covering it because no one else does this and it's depressing. Listen, I want you guys to really think about, like, why haven't you ever, for people that this is new to, I've been covering this event this is my 4th year covering this event. Why don't right-leaning media cover this event? Why don't okay, and so here's the thing too. Yes, this is their big conference, but you also have to understand the left literally does presentations like this all the time. Just because we're having the big conference this weekend, don't get it twisted. The left literally does presentations like this all the time. We watch their presentations constantly. We cannot keep up with the amount of presentations like this the left does. It is a never-ending deluge of educational materials, okay? The reason I say this is, think about all the people that you have never heard about this stuff from. Think about all the people who never bothered to tell you this is what's going on. Think about all the influencers who claim to be an expert in socialism or communism, and they have no fucking clue about any of this. And they don't know any of this information. And then ask yourself, why is that? Why have so many supposedly right-leaning influencers lied to me? Why have so many supposedly right-leaning influencers withheld this information? Because I promise you, it's not that they don't know about it. They absolutely know about it. They just refuse to report on it, and they refuse to engage with it, and they refuse to inform their audience. And I will never stop complaining about this. It is still so bizarre to me that so many people show up to my content and they're like, what the fuck is this? I've never seen this before. Why haven't you seen it before? I've been screaming about this for years. I've been trying to get people to cover this for years. My community's been trying to get people to cover this for years. Literally. Everything we can do to try to cover this. And they don't do it. Ever. Ever. Literally ever. So, that's what I would say to that. Let me see. So when they talk about abolition, they mean not just gender abolition, but a range of different types of abolition. Yeah, so the shirt that Suzanne wanted me to show you guys earlier, this is a shirt. So the shirt I'm wearing, I actually bought at the Socialism Conference when I was undercover at it. This is actually a Haymarket Books socialist shirt. But I bought another shirt at the Socialism Conference. And the other shirt I bought says, abolish everything. So this was literally on sale at their 2023 conference. I'm going to hang it on the wall someday. That's why I still have it. But the reason I bring that shirt up is because, so you asked, there are all sorts of different types of abolition. The most common thing they are referencing when they say the term abolition is prison abolition. Prison abolition, police abolition, defunding the police, all that stuff. That is one of their primary things. There are a ton of sessions at this conference about prison abolition and all that stuff. So prison abolition, not like basically getting rid of the cops, that is usually what they're talking about. They may also say abolition as in abolish capitalism, but they tend to use more liberation when they're referencing capitalism, but sometimes they call it abolition. They do use abolition in regards to gender, but they also believe, oh, looks like the stream is starting, in abolishing everything, which means like it's like nihilist anti-civilization stuff. So there's a lot. To new people, when you're done asking yourself why conservatives never cover this, go ahead and ask your influencers why they haven't covered it. Hound them about it until you get an answer. You won't ever get an answer. I promise you. You won't ever get an answer. Let's see. Are they starting the stream? Hot mic. Music. All right, I'm gonna run and pee real quick. Everyone take a bathroom break. I'll be right back.
Here, I'll put you closer to the podium.
All right. All right. I'm back. I'm back. Did they stop the music? I guess they stopped the music. All right. Sorry. They were playing music when I left. Oh, how's everyone doing? How's everyone feeling about, especially for the new people? I would love you to know how you feel about your first socialism experience in the chat. Oh, the music's back. Good. Let me know, guys. How are you feeling about your first socialism experience? I mean, Sophie said some pretty crazy things in that presentation, but Sophie has definitely said crazier shit than that. Like significantly crazier shit than that. But like our bar for Sophie is also different because we've heard Sophie say so much crazy shit. Yeah. What do you feel dumb about? What do you mean? You shouldn't feel dumb, by the way. This is learning a new language. So like if you don't speak Mandarin and you go to China and they refuse to speak English, you're not dumb because you don't understand them. You don't speak their language. If you don't speak French and you go to France and they don't speak English, then you're not dumb if you don't understand them. You don't speak their language. So it's kind of the same thing with this. It might be confusing because like it sounds like English, and so you're like, what? Like this doesn't make any sense to me based on what I know of English. But you have to understand they are not speaking the same language as you. They're speaking kind of like an academic ease, kind of like mutation of English. But they're not speaking your language, and so that's why you don't understand them. It's not that you're dumb, it's that it just takes time to learn new languages. And there's no shortcut to this. There's no shortcut to learning socialism. This is why it's like it's so dumb when conservatives, usually conservatives, maybe not all. Dave, can you hear me? Oh. That's why it's so dumb when people come on the channel and they're like, "Can't you just explain this all in a 5 to 10 minute video?" And I'm like, "No. No, I cannot. No, they're like," and people get so pissed off, like, "Well, why can't you just explain it?" I'm like, you want me to teach you how to speak a new language in a 5 to 10 minute video? That's not realistic, and that's not going to happen. If you want to learn, sit down and learn. I will teach you. Some people, it takes a while. It takes people months sometimes to become fluent in this. 3 months, 6 months. Some people watch my content for a year before they become fluent in it. Their dictionary is not your dictionary. They may use the same vocabulary as you. They don't use the same dictionary as you. Well, I'm working on a socialist dictionary. I'm working on that. I'm working on books. I'm perpetually working on books about everything. I am going to be refocusing on the books after this conference, though. That's going to be part of the plan. I'm going to be refocusing on the books, on the book writing for the next little bit, because I do actually want to finish 4 more books this year. I want to do the Mary Nardini Gang book. I want that to be finished. I want the Queer Marxism book finished. I want the Re-Education book finished. And I want the Socialist Dictionary finished. So I have 4 more books planned for this year that all of those books need to get finished. So I will be turning my attention back to the book writing. I took a little break because I wrote. I burned myself out at the beginning of the year writing too many books. And I knew it was going to happen, but I need to return to book writing after this. I'll talk about that a little bit more either on Sunday or Monday. I just realized, by the way, that the socialism stream is going to be like through movie night. Wait. No, I'm stupid. I keep thinking today's Saturday. Oh shit, I'm stupid. Hang on. I'm dumb. I thought today was Saturday. I messaged Jennifer earlier and I was like, Jennifer, socialism conference is going to go through movie night. And Jennifer was like, Karlyn, movie night is in 2 nights. And I'm like, oh, fuck me, it's Friday. I was like, I thought it was Saturday. I felt so bad. I was like, oh no, I don't want to ask Jennifer to cancel movie night. I thought it was Saturday. It's not my fault. It's not my fault the socialism conference started on a Friday at on the 4th of July. No, it's not Saturday. See, everyone thought it was. See, this is not just a me problem. Everyone thought it was a Saturday. It's not Saturday, it's Friday. Okay, now I don't feel so dumb. Now I don't feel so dumb at all. It feels like a Saturday. I'm sorry, it's not my fault. I'm not even drunk and I thought it was a different day of the week. Yeah. That's what happens during the socialism conference. During the socialism conference, time is not real. Time is a social construct. It can be any day of the week, really. No, it's not you. It's not you that doesn't understand. Listen, it is extremely common for people who are new to watching socialism to not understand what they're saying. That's part of why we do this. This is like an immersive language course where again, I'll just use the example of France. Like if you want to learn how to speak French, one of the very best things you can do is just move to France. Immerse yourself in the language. You're not going to understand anything at first, but after a couple months immersed in their language, you're going to be able to speak their language because it's all you're hearing, right? It's the same thing with socialism. What we do on this channel is we immerse ourselves in the actual socialist activist presentations. And therefore, we are constantly surrounded with their language. And that's how I learned how to speak their language, was by immersing ourselves in it. Other people did that too. And now I'm working on tools to break it down to make it easier for people to learn, because it is like learning a different language. So you're not dumb, you're not behind, you're not missing anything. This is information that you probably have never been exposed to before. And so it just takes a little bit of time to learn it. But anyone can learn how to speak their language. It just requires time. Like, again, there's no quick fix to this. There's no easy answer to this. There's no way you can cheat this. You have to either want to learn the language or you don't. But once you learn the language, there will be a moment. I've seen this happen over and over and over again. There will be a moment where it clicks for you. And it'll really be as simple as that. It's going to click one day. And the day that the language clicks, you're going to go out into the world and you're going to start seeing socialism everywhere. You're going to start seeing it everywhere. And you will know, people in the chat can attest to this. The moment that it clicks for you, you're like, oh shit, this problem is so much bigger than I thought it was, because you start seeing their language on TV. You start seeing their language all over social media. You start seeing their language everywhere on everything you interact with. You start seeing their language in the commercials. You start seeing the language in the movies. You literally start seeing it every fucking where. Stuff you had never seen before. It was always there. It was literally always right in front of you. You just couldn't see it because you didn't know. It's like putting on the sunglasses in They Live. That's what we're doing. When you learn how to speak socialist, you put on the sunglasses and you can never take the sunglasses off. and you can never unsee what you saw with those sunglasses. Like, you know it's there now and you can't unsee it. And that's when it's all over. And that's when you get obsessed with socialism and you start watching socialism all the time because you're desperate to understand more. And the more you understand, the worse it gets. And then you start to go crazy. And then you become like me. And you just make your entire life about socialism because you're that perturbed and it's that dystopian. But that's what happens. I'm not even joking. I know I've made this sound very, very enticing. You're like, Karlyn, I don't want to watch this anymore. Well, you know what? You're not going to be able to look away now. See, I know. I've been there. You're not going to be able to look away now. All of you that have been watching the Socialism Conference with me, you've already gone down the rabbit hole. It's already too late. You're going to keep coming back to this. You might think you're ignoring it, but you're not going to. You're going to come back. It's over. There's only one direction now to go. Yeah, you probably do see Bash back in Portland and Seattle. Yeah, you probably do. That's probably not a delusion. You probably do. You'll see socialist flyers on the street now. Like, if you're walking down the street in a city, you'll see socialist flyers everywhere. You'll see socialist stickers everywhere. You'll see socialist like spray paint and graffiti. I swear, it's like all of a sudden something that you never knew was there comes to life all around you. When it comes to any country's history, does socialism treat that country's history as another form of capitalism? Yeah, essentially. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I think so. I think the answer is yes. They should be getting started any minute here, guys. It looks like they're running late. They were running late yesterday, too. Are they playing music now or? No, there's no sound right now. I've never been on Jimmy Dore. The only interaction I've ever had with Jimmy Dore was Jimmy Dore lying about me on Twitter. And then when Jimmy Dore was proven wrong when he lied about me on Twitter, he refused to retract it because he is not a man and he's not intellectually honest. And I have no interest in Jimmy Dore at all beyond he didn't retract the lies he told about me when he lied about me on Twitter to all his followers that were so easily disproven. It wasn't even funny. But Jimmy Dore didn't want to acknowledge that because Jimmy Dore is an intellectually dishonest shitbag. Yeah, Jimmy Dore lied. Yep. You can look up the video on my channel. It wasn't even that hard to prove. Jimmy Dore was just fuck off lazy and didn't look into something before he decided to lie about it. See, this is like the bullshit part of like being around all these fucking influencers. It's like, I know they're lying. They know they're lying. And they just want me to shut up about the fact that they're lying because they have more followers than me. And they think I want to be on their show one day. And I'm like, bro, I don't give a fuck. You're an intellectually dishonest shitbag. Sit the fuck down. I will tell everyone that you lied and I don't care.
I feel like they lowered the light for us.
Ugh.
Yeah. Is it just one person? I think there might be two people switching up.
Yep. I never submit to influencer bullshit and then they run around saying, she's crazy. Why do they say I'm crazy? Because I never bent the knee to their bullshit. That's why. Yep. She's cluster B. Well, Still not bending the knee to your bullshit. Sorry. This should be getting started anytime now, guys. They're already running late, but this is par for the course. Yep, you sent my stuff to Canadian podcasters and never heard back. Imagine my shock. Well, I'm glad you found me, Faith and Hope. I'm glad someone gifted you a channel membership. Welcome, welcome. I hit the wrong button because StreamYard started giving me issues over the Facebook stream, and so I was trying to get off the Facebook stream and I just hit the wrong button. It was my mistake. It was a dumb mistake. I will never make that mistake again now, but it was my fault. I want to be crazy like Karlyn when everything is said and done. I'm the most boring, crazy person in the world, I think. Hey, we made it back to the other stream. All good. All good. They turned off the sound again. Yeah, conservatives love to call people mentally ill. And it's like, okay. At some point, it's like you literally call everyone you disagree with crazy. So is it really that everyone that disagrees with you is crazy? Is that really it? Or maybe someone's just having feelings that they don't like? I don't know. Ugh. I got this woodchuck cider variety pack mostly because it had the Granny Smith cider in it and I wanted to try it. But it's got some other good ones. This is a pear one. I had a blueberry one earlier. That was okay. Pear Secco. Socialists always got to be late. If you haven't yet, guys, please make sure you mount the like button for me. Please double check. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Yeah. You're crazy protects their
Good evening,
rent.
everyone.
Yep. Oh, hello.
Woo! Woo! Welcome to this Friday evening plenary of Socialism 2025. So just before we get started, I'm going to call up Miguel to make an announcement.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hola.
A las personas que
Taco,
necesitan
burrito,
interpretación de inglés a
nacho.
español, por favor, nos pueden encontrar en
¿Dónde
aquella
está la
esquinita a la derecha.
biblioteca?
Ahí está mi compañera Natalie y Bárbara, que nos van a estar apoyando. Cualquier cosa, pregunta, por favor, nos pueden
No
encontrar allá.
bueno.
Gracias.
No español, por favor.
And just to do a little shout out for our ASL interpreters up here, Olivia and Gabriella, we thank you. And just to let everyone know that as of a few minutes ago, this is the largest gathering for socialism yet.
The largest socialism conference ever. Wow.
It's really, really, really beautiful to see everyone here in this particular political moment to talk about fighting fascism and learning lessons from the colonies. This idea of folks who have been on the margins really having had the most experience with fighting this kind of brutality and abuse is something that we need to talk about more. And this is the place where we're hoping to start that conversation. We are so honored to have with us Dr. Robin D.J. Kelly. I had to negotiate about how much I'm allowed to say, but I will keep it short because you all came here to hear Robin speak. I do want to say a few words. Just, most folks here probably know that Robin has been a longtime supporter, friend of the conference, of Haymarket Books, and I love to say co-conspirator in this project. I just want to point out a few of his immense contributions and the spirit of generosity and wisdom and sharing that they are offered. Some of you might know some of these books. I'll just point out a few. This landmark in jazz literature, Thelonious Monk, The Life and Times of an American Original. A personal favorite, Hammer and Hoe, for many of us, right? The start
Hammer
of
and Hoe.
our understanding about the importance of knowing our history, but also knowing a little bit about our visions and dreams. And of course, Freedom Dreams, the Black radical imagination. I really urge people to check out, Robin did this wonderful Afterworld for Robin Maynard and Leanne Samasoke Simpson's Rehearsals for Living. And then also, my personal favorite, I was very, very honored to have been able to work on this. Our History Has Always Been Contraband, co-edited by Robin and Colin Kaepernick and Kianga Taylor. It's in defense of Black studies. So all of these, I think, should be available at our little satellite Haymarket table in the back. And if you find the books are sold out or want to see a larger selection, there is also the book room. I am going to leave it at that because I know you want to get talking.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. How's everybody? Good? Yeah, my flight was canceled last night at midnight, and I'm at the airport trying to figure out what to do. So I made it, but I missed this conversation with Dan Denver, and I was sitting in my hotel room working on this talk. So I'm going to figure out, I don't know what I say. I'm going to find out with you. And before I say anything, two things. Thank Anthony Arnoff. Where's Anthony? Yes. I mean, without him, there would be, oh, you're in the back. Without him, there'd be no Haymarket, no socialism. And he's always invited me to these things and always putting me on 5 or 6 different events. Okay. The other thing is that before I begin, I need to make a pitch for a very, very, very important publication called Hammer and Hope. So my challenge is that everyone who applauded can become sustainers. And it's not that much. It could be $5 a month. It could be $50 a month. I pay $50, but I also contribute in other ways. I will give everything to keep this magazine going. And you got to realize that one of the reasons why Hammer and Hope is working to try to get support and sustain this is because all these funders are pulling their money. Why? Because they publish stuff about Palestine. They publish stuff about, tenants' rights. They publish stuff about communism. And so when that money disappears, it's very hard to keep the publication going. So I'm really urging you all to support Hammer and Hope. Tell your friends, read it. It has some really good stuff in it, trust me. Okay, so I also need to just announce something. Anthony, don't get mad at me, but this is my last keynote address at Socialism 2025. Why is that? I hate doing this. I really don't, because I don't like standing up in front of an audience, like in the audience, everyone's looking for answers. That's why we're here, right? And then fortunately, there's no Q&A after the end of this. But this pressure of having to stand up here and answer questions and try to, address issues when we're all trying to address those issues. I do all the cooking in my house, and one of the things that I know is that sage is an herb. Okay, think about that. That's my only definition of sage is it's an herb. It gives that like kind of beautiful smell. But I'm not a sage. I never can be. What I am is I'm a teacher. I'm a professor. I'm a scholar of history. I'm not ashamed of that fact. I'm a better historian than activist, and I'll never pretend to be otherwise. And that means that I spend my time and my life when I'm not being beaten up by my children, asking questions, right? Trying to make connections and discovering what is hidden, to comprehend the dialectic. And it's what makes me a Marxist, right? What makes me a Marxist is not the emphasis on political economy. It's not the vulgar materialism that passes off as Marxism, and the thing that's driving all these attacks on Cedric Robinson, which make no sense to me. And that means that I can't possibly have all the answers or most of the answers. In fact, I also recognize that there are some things for which there are no apparent answers, right? Either because we haven't studied the question deep enough, or the answers will be determined by the history we make, right? We make answers and struggle. Okay, so having said that, the most striking thing about Socialism 2025 this year is how many sessions or talks are about lessons from lessons for. It's like a 3-day summer school, right? And I don't know that, I didn't know this when I came up with the title of this talk, because I always come up with titles first and then think about it later on the fly. But honestly, I wanted to use, the title really came out of a very specific thing. I wanted to use this occasion to recognize the 75th anniversary of Discourse on Colonialism, which is this year. And it just happens to be the 25th anniversary since I contributed the foreword to the monthly review edition. And I should say, I know 25 years ago, if I could redo it, I would, but there's no redos. And I should say that the version that Joan Pinkham translated back in the 70s was actually not the 1950 edition, but the revised, expanded 3rd edition put out by Presidents Africains. So technically, it's the 70th anniversary of that text as we know it. And, as far as I know, the original was not translated, and I've never actually seen it. So the book has become very popular right now, way more popular than it was 25 years ago when Christopher Phelps had asked me to write the foreword. Discourse, of course, is best known for tracing the roots of fascism.
What? Don't.
To colonialism. Césaire delivers
The roots of fascism or colonialism? Oh, come on.
Of the West, submitting
not my
as
fault.
evidence
It's
of
YouTube. I'm not touching
colonial
anything.
crimes in the form of severed heads and ears, genocide, the epistemic violence of consigning entire populations to being nothing more than beasts of burden, or occupants of land that belong to the civilized or the chosen according to their God. Fascism
Oh, come on.
was the boomerang. You know, the argument, of course, is not universally accepted, primarily because the definition of fascism
They're digging around on
is
their end is
hotly
what's going on.
contested
This is
still.
not, this is
If I
from
had
the
a
conference.
dime, right, for everyone who's going to be like, well, is it really fascism? I'd be rich. In fact, I could buy out the state, right? But it's like this still ongoing thing. And I'm telling you, I'm not interested in debating whether or not what we're seeing from the Trump Heritage Foundation state is actual fascism.
The Trump
neo-fascism,
Heritage Foundation
no
state.
fascism,
Okay.
something else. I will say this, though. Everyone nowadays quotes Langston Hughes' 1936 speech at the US Congress Against War and Fascism, where he said, fascism is a new kind, fascism is a new name for that kind of terror the Negro has always faced in America. Okay? Bye. Thank you. But few people include the rest of the quote, which is, this kind of terrorism is extending more and more to groups of peoples whose skins are not Black. Sometimes they mention that. And by the way, the quote's not even complete.
It's not about skin
but
color?
that's the part that's not always there. Now, why is this important?
I had no idea.
Two reasons. One is obvious. It underscores the need for solidarity. But secondly, and this is the important point I want to make, is that second sentence, it cuts straight to the problem with the fascism debate. Fascism becomes recognizable in the second sentence. That is, the kind of terrorism is extending more and more to groups of people whose skins are not Black, whereas the first sentence is considered not fascism. See, that's a problem. Think about it. That's a big problem. And part of what inspired me to sort of think about this, and even my writing on Césaire and Césaire's own writing, is about that first sentence, okay? Césaire exposes a problem with this split, why Hughes's first sentence also defines fascism and why that matters. So I'm not going to linger on the colonial roots of fascism, but I'm going to explore like four things. One, the particular role colonies played in buttressing, so-called classical fascism from the 20s to the 40s, as well as the fascist tendencies or state forms coming from so-called liberal democracies. And part of what I'm going to say is that the difference between fascist and liberal democracies is not that sharp, okay? Second,
difference between fascism and liberals is not that sharp.
In suppressing class struggle. Third, how Black radicals in particular came to see anti-fascism and anti-colonialism as sort of one and the same. And the consequences
I mean, you're
of not
basically Black
doing
now
that.
then, right?
And then finally, and most critically,
good to see you, Amalek.
Observation that fascism was not defeated in the Second World War, but flourished by way of ongoing colonial expansion. And so think about what are the implications for our times. So I will disappoint you if you think I'm going to literally give you lessons about like what anti-colonial struggle might mean for us. There's some lessons, but some things, what I'm really trying to do is understand this relationship in a deeper sort of way. So first, it's important to recognize that the consolidation of the modern colonial state.
Are you guys going to be doing a space later,
Amalek? Occurred pretty much simultaneously.
I know you just did like a 30-hour thing.
Think about that. And I just to avoid
I want a
some
space after
confusion,
this,
'cause
damn
there's
it.
always confusion. Confusion comes with the territory. The modern colonial state, and I mean that modern colonial state and the fascist state are both capitalist states.
Oh yeah,
just particular forms.
The modern colonial state and the fascist
is
state
part of a world capitalist
or the capitalist
system,
state,
not solely for the purposes of primary accumulation.
Oh yeah, it's all about capitalism.
I think Walter Rodney has one of the best quotes about like how
fascism means
fascism,
capitalism.
one we don't always use when he writes in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Fascism was a monster born of capitalist parents. Fascism came as the end product of centuries of capitalist bestiality, exploitation, domination, and racism mainly exercised outside Europe.
Fascism
And I
came
wish
from
I could talk like
capitalist
Walter, 'cause,
bestiality?
I mean, if he said it in his Guyanese way, it would be like, you'd be jumping up and down.
What the
you
fuck
know?
does that mean?
So with the exception of settler colonies and perhaps India for different reasons, which had a very sophisticated state apparatus before any European showed up, many African colonies did not have a
Yeah.
fully functional colonial
It's
state
probably
until the First World War.
anti-Semitic.
This is important, and I know we sometimes take it for granted. We don't think about periodizing colonialism exactly. The point of the colonial state was to create infrastructure for extracting raw materials and produce, but most importantly, to pacify the indigenous population. The colonial state was a coercive state intent on securing territory, crushing opposition, and turning people into peasants and workers. Through what? Through dispossession and enclosure, through systemic taxation, through forced labor, through the introduction of currency for wages and new markets. All colonies had some kind of military force, often made up of indigenous people or settlers, standing police like the Force Publique in Congo. And in fact, during both world wars, according to Walter Rodney, Africa played at least 3 key roles, right, during the wars. One, to provide a range of raw materials essential for modern arms, and we know this. There would be no atomic bomb without the uranium from Africa. Secondly, to provide bases for European militaries, which it still does. And 3, to provide troops and laborers for war. Or to put it another way, European powers use fascism to defeat fascism. Okay? The militarization of colonial life, what made colonialism possible, became foundational to the post-colonial state, right? And decades of violence and coups d'etats and military rule are among the consequences. This is not about tribalism. This is not about backwardness. This is not about barbarism. It's about the colonial state being a militarized state. And that's the foundation for so many post-colonial societies. The militarized state is yet another example of the boomerang effect, one that predates formal fascist rule. So Walter Rodney observes in World War I, Germany, it was the commander of German forces in East Africa in World War I who actually was brought back to Germany. He was promoted to general and directed the massacre of German communists in Hamburg in 1918. And Rodney calls this a decisive turning point in German history. For once, the most progressive workers had been crushed. The path was clear for the fascist deformation of the future. Therefore, the state and capital also had to do the work of what? Pacifying and disciplining European workers. This is the era of what? The Russian Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, communists and socialist-led workers and uprisings in Germany and Hungary, Italy, and elsewhere. It was also a period of counter-revolution. And who's behind counter-revolution? That includes social democratic regimes like in Germany. And what does that do? What do? They brutally suppress strikes. They outlawed labor unions.
The Nazis
They outlawed left-wing groups.
Correct.
They abandoned democracy and civil liberties under the guise of a state of emergency. What are these? These are the characteristics of fascism.
Yeah, that's okay.
From social democrats.
Well, they're not social
like
democrats.
said,
they were national socialists.
Is not that sharp.
They were national socialists, bro.
And Clara Mattei has this great book called The Capital Order. And she makes a really persuasive case that during World War I and after, austerity became the capitalist state's method to discipline the working class. And she looks at Italy and the UK. And it also was used to suppress post-war labor rebellions and crush demands for an expanded social wage and to crush socialist dreams. It created a direct
I'm okay with crushing
path
socialist dreams.
to fascism in Italy. Austerity did. And she writes, austerity embodied the active
In fact, I'm going to make a
intervention of the
T-shirt that
state
says
to
"Crush
reinforce
Socialist
capital
Dreams."
accumulation through privatizations, bailouts of financial and industrial complexes, monetary deflation, and especially coercive control of labor. Speaking broadly, the nationalist slant of fascist austerity emerges through the sacrifice of the majority for the saving, investing minority, who purported to represent the interests of the whole nation. So we treat austerity as like a tool in a toolbox, like it's a natural thing. And what she's saying is a weapon, right? And that weapon led to or opened a pathway for fascism by crushing workers' rebellions. And again, this is in concert with what's happening in the colonies. So in the so-called liberal countries, in this case, the UK, it did the same thing, right? Because when it comes to economic policy, there's no democratic means to stop austerity policies. Like, it's not on the vote, right? It's introduced by these people that call themselves economists. They get paid a lot of money to just talk shit, right?
Real, actually.
There's some good economists. I know all 6 of them, you know? So all these like so-called experts, like technocrats. And of course, there's no input on the part of working people except how do they input?
Hey, thanks, Alpod. Appreciate it.
Action. Austerity ultimately prevailed as a new common sense, resulting in a general public acceptance that it was a necessary and neutral tool to weather capitalist crises. Okay, so what about the colonies? What's the relationship? Liberal and authoritarian states shared with
all
varying
good,
degrees
all good,
an ideology of racial destiny and a drive for territorial expansion. Again, notice I'm not making a distinction between like the fascist regimes and the liberal ones. They share all that. These colonial ventures were not just economic, but they inculcated workers with nationalism, generating loyalty and
not
softening the blows of
nationalism.
austerity. Workers sacrificed for the nation, right?
Oh, no.
So imagine the implications of workers buying war bonds. That makes no sense. And yet workers were buying war bonds because they had to be convinced, right, to do the work for their nation, to be part of that nation, to love that nation, right, rather than the workers of the world. So let's take the case of Italy.
Socialists hate nationalism because nationalism means borders.
Like much of Europe, Italy ended the First World War in debt, with high unemployment, wave of strikes and working class insurrections, often led by socialists, communists, and anarchists. The Liberal Party ruled, but was losing power and legitimacy at the end of the war. And it chose, as it was losing its power, to collaborate with fascists. Now, they could have collaborated with the Italian Communist Party, but they made a choice. Okay, so how does this translate? Well, it's kind of like the Democratic Party, where recruiting Liz Cheney and military leaders, but undermining Mamdani and Sanders and AOC and so on. It's
shit talking the Democrats.
The Liberal
Shit
Party,
talking the
Democratic
Democrats.
Party, right? Undermining the left. But Mussolini was not interested in collaboration. Trade unions called a general strike in 1922. The fascists crushed that strike, marched on Rome, and basically seized power. And the Liberal Party at that point capitulated. Now, Mussolini's in power. And what does he do? He sets out to rebuild the Roman Empire to restore national pride, to recruit workers to support a colonial venture. So in 1935, this is later, Italy invades Ethiopia. And we know that story, but what I want to emphasize is that even before Mussolini, right, Italy had colonized Libya under the Liberal Party following the Italo-Turkish War of 1911. And it was under
Well,
the
her next one
Liberal
is about
Party,
children's liberation,
under the
so
Liberal
hang on
Party,
to your
again, you see
hats.
the parallels with the Democrats, that Italy's occupying forces gassed and starved Libyans, created concentration camps, ultimately killed 1/10 of the population, consistent with all other imperial countries which waged brutal, often genocidal wars in colonies. That's France, that's Britain, that's the civilized countries, right? So when Italian occupation forces under Mussolini used mustard gas on Ethiopians in 1935, and killed 250,000 Ethiopians within 3 years of the war, bombed Red Cross hospitals and ambulances. Who does that? Massacred prisoners of war. They did not sharply diverge from the Liberal Party's colonial policies. It wasn't a break. Again, I'm trying to get us to think before we start debating about, should we build an alliance with, and is this really fascism? The line is not that sharp, right? Fundamentally, this is about capitalism and war. So besides the fact, is another point I want to make, is that Western countries were quick to recognize Italy's occupation of Ethiopia as legitimate, and war crimes were ignored until 1940, and that's when, of course, 1940 is when Italy becomes an enemy of the Allies, and they declare war. Otherwise, they would let those crimes go. The invasion of Ethiopia sparked the first stirrings of an anti-fascist movement organized and led by Black people. Harlem, they formed the Provisional Committee for the Defense of Ethiopia. Across the country, thousands of Black men volunteered to fight. The Garveyite Black Legion established a training camp in upstate New York with 3,000 volunteers. And although Haile Selassie was very problematic in other ways, was pressured by the US to refuse volunteers, the point I want to make here, whether they went or not, is that these formations understood anti-colonialism and anti-fascism were intertwined. A year later, a couple years later, depending when they go, Black anti-fascists turned their attention to the defense of Republic in Spain, joining volunteers. And again, they understood the fight against Franco in Spain as simultaneously striking a blow against colonialism. It was retribution for Ethiopia, and it was a blow against racism at home. And I wrote about this many years ago in this other book called Race Rebels. You can get that if you want to. And so I'm not going to repeat what's in the book, but I want to return to this question of the international brigades in Spain to underscore the limitations, even the dangers of anti-fascism without anti-colonialism. Okay, what do I mean by that? Okay, first of all, Moroccans under Spanish colonialism made up a substantial proportion of Franco's armies. African-American volunteers noticed the same Spanish loyalists as Republicans who treated them respectfully, right, if not adoringly, spewing racist vitriol against North Africans, right, because they're on Franco's side. It was not entirely surprising, right, because Spain is a place where school children were learning about, about the age of Moorish domination from the 8th century to the 15th century, about how Christian crusades saved Spain and the rest of Europe from this heathen menace to civilization, right? So the Islamophobia was deeply embedded there. Besides that, in loyalist posters, North African troops were depicted as extremely dark. They distorted their image in order to portray the Moors as an evil race of people. So Black volunteers and Black radical intellectuals, unlike the Spaniards and some of the white, not all of them, but some of the white American comrades in the brigades, came to see North Africans as victims of colonial oppression. In other words, they're on the other side of the war, but they're not seeing them necessarily as like fascists. They're seeing them as being recruited and forced.
No one is
to
free
fight
until
on
we're all
behalf
free
of
at
fascists
capitalism.
because they are colonized. And these are Black people who recognize this. So Richard Wright, for example, wrote about this. He sums it up this way. He says, the fascists have duped and defrauded a terribly exploited people. Talking about the North African Moroccans. Langston Hughes once again noted the irony of Franco sending Muslim troops on a crusade to rid Christian Spain of communism. Which, think about that, right? And he writes, I knew that Spain once belonged to the Moors, a colored people ranging from light dark to dark white. Now the Moors have come again to Spain with the fascist armies as cannon fodder for Franco. So some radicals called on the Republican government of Spain, the Popular Front, to grant independence to North Africa. In fact, they were saying grant independence to all your colonies under Spanish rule, arguing that such a measure not only had political merit, but it would in effect undercut Franco's forces. But they would not. The Spanish government did not. It wouldn't go as far as ending colonialism. In fact, it went further the other way by offering territorial concessions to France and Britain in exchange for Western support, which they really didn't get. The Communist Party of Spain and the PUM, which is the Anti-Stalinist Workers' Party of Unification, believed that an explicit anti-colonial policy might actually foment rebellion within the ranks of Franco's army, but they supported the government's position. And so for the sake of maintaining the Popular Front, they didn't say anything. The Spanish Socialist Workers' Party was outright, we'll never give up the colonies. Like, why you call yourself socialist? Like, I'm looking at this. So my point here is that, so many people on the left who are fighting against fascism could not see that the same regime was upholding and maintaining fascism, right, through colonialism. So many international brigadiers started calling North African troops, quote, things like the scum of the earth.
Oh, come on.
Black riffraff and mercenaries, to which George Padmore, a Black radical, wrote a rebuke in 1938. He says, it seems rather
on their end,
strange
it's not mine.
That the people who use these epithets conveniently forget that these unfortunate Africans
because look at the sign language interpreter, nothing's happening to that, it's their video,
as Europeans who are forced by sheer economic necessity into the armed forces of the capitalist states and used by the imperialists to shoot down unarmed and defenseless natives in the colonies in the name of democracy and law and order. See, that is the critique right there. Right? So he placed, the blame on the Popular Front government for continuing to hold on to the colonies. And colonialism is precisely what made it possible for Franco to mobilize the army, okay? In any case, the other thing that Césaire was keenly aware of is that fascism was not defeated at the end of the Second World War. And he's not alone in making that point, though in hindsight, I do wish that if I could rewrite the forward, I would have said more about that. So Césaire explicitly references the atrocities carried out by French occupation forces against the anti-colonial movements in Vietnam and Madagascar after World War II as evidence of fascism's persistence. And I just want to quote, he says, think of it, 90,000 dead in Madagascar, Indochina trampled underfoot, crushed to bits, assassinated, tortures brought back from the depths of the Middle Ages. And of course, when you talk about Madagascar, he's referring to the massacre of the Malagasy people by French occupation forces in 1947 during the anti-colonial uprising. And you know who was there to help put down the uprising? Troops from Senegal. We have to know this history. So before the publication of Discourse on Colonialism in 1950, post-war anti-colonial and anti-racist movements insisted that the victory over fascism was incomplete. So some examples. 1945, this is South Africa, 3 years before the Afrikaner-led National Party came.
Socialist technology, y'all. Socialists, hang in there. We're almost done.
Apartheid. The non-European unity movement issued a statement.
Oh, come on. Are you shitting me?
That non-white South Africans can continue to live, quote, under a tyranny with very little different from Nazism. And why is that? Because by calling them colonial wars, it signals that the instigator of the war
Come on,
were not
socialists.
those
Get
fighting
it
for the
together,
freedom.
socialists.
They
Come
didn't
on.
instigate the war, right?
Oh my God.
They assumed their basic right to freedom in this new global order that says you got a right to freedom. So if they fight back, it's because the war had been waged on them before their birth. It had been waged on them from the moment of the colonial domination, right? So what are these colonial wars? Algeria, they want to hold on to Kenya. They want to hold on to Vietnam, to the Congo, to Southern Rhodesia, which outlawed all African nationalist parties in the fascist Rhodesian Front, a party of settlers, won a majority of seats in the legislature when? In 1962. Of Israel.
Israel.
So Dr. Fayez,
Israel mentioned.
Sayegh, renowned scholar.
If I
and
reload this,
rapporteur,
is this going to do
observed in
anything to fix this fucking problem? I doubt it, but like I feel the need to at least try to reload it or something because
renowned scholar.
no,
and
it has
UN
not fixed the
rapporteur,
problem.
Observed in 1970 in an essay, the congruity of the creation of Israel and the expansion of and consolidation of settler colonialism, quote, in a historical era marked by universal rejection of colonialism in principle and near total liquidation of colonial empires in practice. So that's the irony. It's like, here's like the latest colonial outpost in the midst of a period
Israel is a colonial outpost. This is why they don't like Israel. Israel are the settler colonists.
So that same year, the same year that French occupation forces crushed the uprising in Madagascar, Zionist militias waged a deliberate campaign of terror and expropriation, razing Palestinian villages, taking or destroying their property, and above all, taking their land. And from 1947
They're pissed off Israel took the Palestinians' land.
Militias drove more than 800,000
That's why they don't like
people,
them.
that is 80% of the Palestinian population, from their land, destroyed or emptied over 500 villages. Demolished homes, said Ben Gurion, claimed to be fighting.
Oh, come on. Socialists, for the love of fuck. I'm sorry, guys. This is all on their end. I can't control any of this.
It was a labor party, the Jewish working classes. The workers, so-called workers' state of Israel, passed laws barring Palestinians' right.
The workers' state of Israel? Was it actually called that?
Right to return or retrieve their property, which is a very unlaborly thing to do.
This sucks. This sucks real bad.
Guilty and not guilty. That's what's happening right now. Like the majority of Israelis, Jewish Israelis, have decided that there are no innocents in Gaza. That everyone is good. It doesn't matter. You could
Yeah,
be
that's
newborn.
actually true. Real.
You're not innocent. UN standards. And yet, that act of colonization was backed by
Come on.
all Western liberal democracies, those nations that claim to have defeated fascism. Zionism turns the history of Jewish displacement, expropriation, and terror into class rule and colonial violence.
Zionism turns Israel into class rule, into the oppressor. What the fuck, Socialism Conference? See, look, the woman in the bottom is fine.
Plant and animal.
This is because they hate Elon Musk. Elon Musk is cursing them.
And therefore from culture.
It's over.
The culture, the memory, the life worlds.
Can't even give us a good keynote stream. See, socialists want to be in charge of the means of production, yet they can't even do a live
ancestors that
stream on the
tied them
internet.
there.
It's not fair.
Expropriation,
These people want to be in
displacement,
charge of the food supply. They literally want to be in charge of feeding everyone, and they can't stream a fucking live stream on the internet. Do you want to know why I
isn't
know
just
socialism will inevitably
spiritual
fail?
death,
This.
but literal death. The process of ethnic cleansing.
If you can't live stream on the internet, you can't be in charge of the food supply. I feel like this should be just like a basic thing. Like, you need to learn to crawl before you can learn to walk. And if you can't run a live feed on the internet, socialists, you don't get to be in charge of deciding who eats and how much they eat and what you're going to grow in the field. You also don't get to be in charge of the energy grid. You don't get to be in charge of what cars get made. You don't get to be in charge of anything. You have to learn to crawl before you can walk, socialists. If you can't do a live stream, this is unacceptable.
Their destruction is mandatory.
And they're winning. They're winning because our side sucks so bad. Just think about that.
Creation as a settler colonial state, not just
Israel's
in whole or
creation
in
is a
part,
settler
but in
colonial
parts.
state. Now we've got like fucking strobe light going on.
Skip over this part.
Oh, now it's all gone. Oh no. Now we get this. What the fuck? Now we get this sign language lady. Israel did it. Israel did it. Jew curse. We love Jews on this channel. No anti-Semitism. Jew curse. Oh no, we still have the sign language lady. No! What's going on? Socialists, what the fuck? Socialists, you literally had one job. This is the only presentation going right
Dismembering
now.
and scattering flesh exceeds extermination.
And it's over. It's over. It's back over. There's nothing that can be done. Maybe if they took the camera that's on the sign language lady and they
intended
moved it
for
over to him,
display.
that would be better, but
It
that
is
would be
meant, in her
ableist, so
words,
they
to-
can't do it. Like, all they need to do is use the camera for the sign language lady and move it over to him, but they won't do it because they'll be accused of ableism if they do it.
Mutilate the killed and
Oh,
turn the
we're
killed body
so
into mere
fucked.
flesh.
We're all
Remember
gonna starve.
Gendered racial violence
It's over.
and an assertion of sovereignty. We see that
Yeah, it's not like you know what the funniest thing is? Why the fuck are the deaf not just reading the captions? Like, why do they need a sign language interpreter? They can read the captions.
this in slavery,
no.
right? And
No.
it continues well after.
We are so fucked.
Nadra sees the
It's over. Hey, Maria Callas fan. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
objective
Embrace
behind
remote
Israeli sexual
remote
violence
theater.
to
Yep.
invade and violate the
The
intimacy,
internet has been colonized. The live stream is colonized.
sexuality, and bodily integrity of an expression of fascism.
This is his final keynote address. They can't even record it. It's over. We're all gonna die. If you have grandkids, congratulations. They're gonna starve in the socialist utopia because the socialists can't figure out the basics. But the right is even worse and don't do anything to stop them. So the socialists will win, and they
Which
will control the
means
food supply, and we'll all
long
starve.
Palestinian struggle for freedom and self-determination.
Oh. I hope they actually got video of this that we can watch later,
Nations
because I actually do
built
want to hear this part about
anti-colonial
Israel.
and an anti-fascist
Like, unironically. I want to hear it.
The last thing I want to talk about is the U.S. So Césaire writes,
They do want kids. That's a lie. This is what we call a conservative bullshit narrative. It's not real. You need to stop making shit up. They have kids.
was on
They have
US soil.
childcare at this
so it
conference,
didn't
bro.
appear as a boomerang, at least not on the surface.
There is a whole childcare program at this conference. Don't tell me they don't have kids.
Since they were talking about homegrown fascism a la Langston Hughes, they saw the post-war peace as a ramping up
Yeah,
of
this is your
fascism at
retirement
home.
video. This is your grand celebration. Thanks, socialists. Thanks.
Drake, they predicted, and I quote, the Negro may again become a chronic.
I've been tracking the far left for 4 years. You don't even know that leftists have kids. So you and I are not the same. We are not in the same league. Our opinions are not the same. Our
Relief
perspectives are not the
client,
same. I am so far above you. It's
despised by
not
the
even funny.
majority of
They
white
literally have childcare at their fucking conference. Are you stupid? If they didn't have kids, why would they have childcare at their conference, bro?
citizens who
Do
have
you
to
even know what their
support him
definition of
from
reproductive
taxes
justice is?
and the
I'm going to
symbol
bet you
around
don't.
which
Because their definition of reproductive justice includes having kids. Hey, thanks,
the
okay. They have
aggressions of
childcare.
a
Yep.
frustrated society rise in
Yep.
Bronzeville's 47th Street.
They do. It's true. There are communist games that train kids how to be good communists. You're going to tell me they don't have kids? They literally make games for kids. But no, conservatives got to lie to everyone. It's all they know how to do because conservatives don't really understand the left at all in any way.
Encircle the globe. A blow struck for freedom in Bronzeville finds its echo.
You love abortion, Amalek? Oh, no. Oh, no. What about big tech's goal to protect the
in
eggs?
Chongqing
Oh,
in
no.
Moscow against fascism was over. And then he writes,
We might as well amuse ourselves if we can't listen to the talk. But we have to be responsible. Maybe they'll fix it. This sucks, though. This sucks so bad.
we now turn to the war within our own country. Victory for democracy will mean some chance of
Democracy
peace.
means socialism.
Victory for our own native fascism, the Hitler which lives inside of us.
Oh, not for your people? Okay,
in the
I
nation,
understand.
will mean
For other people.
that we're setting the stage for the next world war. And his warning was echoed.
It's over. It's over. Robin D.G. Kelly is retired now. This is his grandson. Come on, socialists. Come on. This is so bad. It's just over. It's literally just over. We still have the sign language, though. The sign language is working just fine. Socialists. Yeah, I got to get up early tomorrow, too. We're streaming. Oh, now she's done, too. Uh-oh. Is it all over? Oh, no. They were just swapping out. No, they're just swapping out a new one. Well, I can't really fill the space, guys. I'm almost on my shawl. You might be able to see my shawl at the end of the stream, but hopefully the speaker comes back. Yeah, the other interpreter needs a potty break. I'm like so close to be. Oh, he's back. Oh, we're back.
Subject to ongoing dispossession, resource extraction, and the violation of sovereign rights and so forth. And by the way, I live in LA. People don't realize that a lot of people are being picked up. They're almost all indigenous. Spanish
all
is
the
not even
people
necessarily
being
the first
deported
language,
are indigenous.
right?
That
Just
doesn't even make sense.
indigenous languages spoken in LA alone. And so these are indigenous people who are being picked up and kidnapped.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So that's
Yeah,
really,
they're all
really important to
indigenous,
realize.
sure.
If we think of conjunctures, not as singular moments or periods in a unitary world, but rather multiple overlapping concentric circles, which is the way I think about conjunctures, in a combined and uneven world, then we can talk about a very long colonial conjuncture that is still with us now.
Yeah,
And
that has
would
absolutely
mean,
nothing to do with the
for those
abortion
of us who
argument,
still
bro. I mean,
believe
congrats on your
a
history, but you still don't know
non-capitalist
what they
future is
believe
both
about
possible
kids. I'm
and
sorry.
necessary to save the planet,
Your family history doesn't mean you
that
understand
there
reproductive
can
justice.
be no socialism without decolonization.
There can be
You
no
cannot have
socialism without decolonization. Okay, that's a good quote. Decolonization means giving the
And
land back to the
Just to
indigenous.
circle back, I mean, you take the question of Palestine, in many ways, there is
Palestine
truth
is
in the assertion
decolonization.
that Palestine is the last colonial outpost, the last
See?
anti-colonial war. However, that implies that the world is decolonized, and this is not true. The fact is, the genocide persists precisely because the colonial order is still intact. On a global scale, it just takes on a different form or appearance. So we look for domination through state forms, but often it takes the form of transnational, multinational, and non-national corporate entities that drive and manage global production of commodities. I mean, who are the beneficiaries of genocidal war? Hewlett-Packard, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Raytheon, and the like.
You guys hear them
So
talking about
how
the Jews? I
different
don't.
are these from the joint stock companies of the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, responsible for colonizing Africa, Asia, and the Americas? What is clear, however, is that the unnamed and unacknowledged colonial violence today is arguably more brutal and more pervasive than the era of high colonialism, of the 19th and mid-20th century. In the 21st century, we are living with more violence, more war, more weapons, more lethal capacity, more military bases, more displacement, more land grabs than a century ago. And if you consider, just pay attention to the Eastern Congo, extending to Uganda and Rwanda, with China providing military support for the Democratic Republic of Congo to protect its own investments in cobalt mining. By most estimates, 7 million people have been internally displaced in Eastern Congo. So the boomerang keeps being thrown back, sometimes with even more lethal force. So we can't just celebrate the boomerang hitting the Europeans because they keep throwing it back. And by Europeans, that's not just Europeans, they're also the BRIC countries. We'll talk about that. I didn't plan to talk about that because I've talked about it before, but be mad at me if you want to, but there's a rearrangement of power, right? It's still a colonial relationship. And despite like 85 years of international law, the UN, all these institutions purportedly designed for world peace in a decolonized world, despite all that, nothing has been able to stop the boomerang permanently. So Césaire writes, the hour of the barbarian is at hand. The modern barbarian, the American hour. Violence, excess, waste, mercantilism, bluff, conformism, stupidity, vulgarity, disorder.
Stupidity, real.
Right? So I'm saying that we are living in the American hour, not as a rising empire, but a dying one. Stuart Hall calls it iron times. Gramsci calls it an interregnum in which, quote, morbid phenomena of the most varied kind come to pass. By the way, that's what he really says. He doesn't say times of monsters. That's someone else's. Time of monsters, that's someone else's translation. I'm not going to get into that. Although it sounds sexy, I like this translation better. So I do think, this last thing I want to say is I do think that Césaire's conclusion is fundamentally correct. And like, oh, you get your Marxist card back, okay, right? Though we must be precise about what he is saying in that conclusion. I'm not going to read it, but I want you to read it yourself. To recognize that he is speaking of the salvation and not redemption of Europe. So just read a short passage. He writes, the salvation of Europe is not a matter of a revolution in methods. It is a matter of the revolution, capital R, the one which until such times as there is a classless society will substitute for the narrow tyranny of a dehumanized bourgeoisie, the preponderance of the only class that still has a universal mission because it suffers in its flesh from all the wrongs of history, from all the universal wrongs. The proletariat, by proletariat, he's not just talking, he's talking about sort of global, but here he's specifically talking about the European proletariat because he's talking about the salvation of Europe. What is he saying? He says, it is the European proletariat that's key, not because it is the most advanced, right? Not because it controls the most developed productive forces, but because Europe is an invention founded on racial and gender hierarchy, not unlike the Negro, the savage, and so on.
Europe is an invention
needs to be
founded on
destroyed.
racial and gender hierarchy
Right?
that
And by
needs to
Europe,
be
Europe's not
destroyed.
just that, part of
What?
Asia. Europe has actually become a global phenomenon. The proletarian revolution, a true one, must rid itself of hierarchies of human, right? Hierarchies of the human. One of the gifts of a decadent bourgeoisie.
Europe must
only
be
then
destroyed
that Europe can free itself
because it's built
and
on
join the rest of
hierarchy.
the world in the class struggle. And this is what
Holy
he's saying.
shit.
Of course, that was the hope in 1950.
Hey,
or
Amalek,
55.
you still here?
That time is past. But we are in a new time, but we're also in an old one. The colonial conjuncture is still with us. And so if we're going to fight and try to build that society, that world, we've got to basically understand that the fight against fascism is a fight against colonialism, is a fight against capitalism. And we can't be parsing out the places that we think we have to respond to in a state of emergency and the ones that we think are friendly to us that have been killing us the whole time. Thank you.
The fight against fascism is a fight against colonialism, is a fight against capitalism. Could not be more clear. Could not be more clear. And I just finished my shawl. I only had this much yarn left to finish. That's it. Yes. And my shawl looks like a keffiyeh. Here we go.
Thank you so much for that accompaniment.
That has a stitch marker.
And thank you everyone for coming out on this Friday night. I won't even mention what day it is.
Friday.
Just one other thing I forgot to say is that there have been many changes in the schedule. So please check the online one because that's the one that's going to be most accurate. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good night.
That's it? All that. Well, we made it. That's the shirt I'm wearing. This lady's wearing my same shirt. That's exactly the shirt I'm wearing right there, the Haymarket shirt. Except I'm not. I mean, people think I'm that fat, but I swear to God, I'm not. Okay, we're done. Hey, most importantly, do you guys want to see my shawl? I literally just finished it. And then we'll talk about what we're doing tomorrow, but do you guys want to see the shawl I literally just finished? Literally just finished. So this is the shawl knitted with Judy's birthday yarn. We have our big kind of like thing in the middle. And then we do some chevrons on the side. And then we do some cool lattice stitch. And the last part I just did is the red border. I need to block it so it doesn't curl like this. But there is a red border on the bottom of the shawl just for a touch of red. Because it's mostly black and white, but now it has a red border. And I have to block it so that it looks nicer. But that's what it is. That is the shawl. It also has a pop of red in the shawl. Yeah, it's a rabbinical shawl. I made my own rabbi shawl. I did. I made a rabbi shawl. Yep. I'm going through my black and white period. In terms of knitting and color choice in general. I need to paint the wall. I'm painting my wall at some point to be red. But now I have my shawl. I can look like a rabbi too. All right, we made it. 12 fucking hours. 12-hour stream. I want to congratulate everyone that made it here all day, and I appreciate you guys hanging out all day. As a reminder, we will be back tomorrow. We will be streaming all day again tomorrow. If you want the full streaming schedule, you can head over to the Substack. It's actually right on the homepage. So just click on the streaming schedule. I will put the link in the chat. So if you guys want to drop by tomorrow and you want to know what I'm streaming when, thereabouts. I mean, if they're moving sessions around, the schedule might change. So who really knows? But tomorrow we will be starting at 11, and we'll be starting with revolutionary accompaniment, holding each other when things fall apart. And then we're going to do something about the border and abolishing the borders. And then we're going to do something about higher ed organizing. And then we're going to do something about climate justice. And that's going to be probably pretty crazy. And then we're going to watch a few of the other presentations that we mixed. And then at 8 p.m. tomorrow, the big grand finale, sexual democracy, moral panic, and trans politics. And so we will be streaming socialism probably for about another 10 hours tomorrow. We are watching 22 hours of socialism within a 48-hour period. Yeah, the environmentalism stuff is possibly the craziest. Well, you're assuming I'm going to have time to make clips. You guys are pretty fucking demanding. I don't recall seeing a super chat from you. You're pretty demanding. I just streamed socialism for 12 hours. You think I'm going to sit here and make clips now? I've barely eaten all day. Man, come on. I'm going to go get some what I'm going to do is go get some dinner. and hopefully Amalek and his friends will be doing a Twitter space, and I can listen to that and feel good about myself. And that's what we're going to do. But I do really appreciate everyone who sent in super chats throughout the day. We have blown out my super chat goal twice now, so I promise I'm not going to raise the super chat goal again tomorrow. We're just going to enjoy it. If you want to send me money, you can. If you want to sign up as a supporter on my Substack, you can, and all this stuff. And so that is all we have for tonight, guys. Congratulations to everyone who made it through the end. And I will see you in the AM after I get some much needed sleep. So I hope you guys all have a great rest of your night. I hope you all have a great 4th. And I'm going to start a new shawl tomorrow. And the shawl I start tomorrow is going to be green and dark blue. And that's what we're doing now. I'm moving out of the black and white period, mostly because I don't have any more black and white yarn. But I have green yarn and I have blue yarn. And that's what we're going to do tomorrow for our shawl. I prefer to be called Karlyn, except if you piss me off. If you piss me off, I will make you call me doctor. But I normally don't. If you want to use the doctor, fine. Like some people feel like there's like a need for formality or whatever. But I personally don't care if you call me doctor. You can just call me Karlyn. It's fine. All right, guys. That's all I have for tonight. Have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here? 3 months, May 17th. And what brought you here? That's difficult to answer. piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.